To our local alcohol policy hearings. If we could all please stand for our opening karakia. Te taua mai runga, te taua mai raro, te taua mai roto, te taua mai waho, kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai e. We have apologies today from Councillor Gregg and Deputy Mayor Brosnan. If I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Price, Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Do we have any conflicts of interest? Okay. Just one announcement by myself, noting that there were a number of incomplete submissions included in attachment 1. These should be disregarded as they provide no substantive feedback for Council to consider. Any announcements by Matt? No. Housekeeping, just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed to Council's Facebook page and recorded. Our speakers who are here with us today have 10 minutes to present and respond to questions from elected members, and the presentations must relate directly to the written submissions they are addressing. And we have two of our speakers who have now advised that they're unable to attend. Selwyn Hawthorne and Cherie Enash will not be with us today, which means as we move into our speakers, and I see that he is here, our first speaker of the day is Shay Bird. Welcome, Shay. We'll invite you up to the microphones here.
Hold up first. Right, so yeah, my name's Shay Bird. For those that don't know, I felt I should put in a submission for numerous reasons. One of them, it's mainly directed around the on-premise side of the industry. So my job actually, for full disclosure, I run a liquor store, so I manage the bottler in Onikawa, but I didn't have too many comments on the proposed changes there. I felt that was fairly okay. My main submission was just around on-premise and the potential issues it can create if we don't have somewhere for people to go. I won't take up 10 minutes of your time, but essentially I think that if we move to change the times that they can open to by an hour, we're going to have the same problems just at a different time. There are always going to be issues, we can't deny that, but I think that if we have people who are going to drink alcohol in a controlled environment, then that is a lot better than them not being in a controlled environment. So on-premise businesses are a controlled environment. They have managers on duty, they have people who are looking out for other people. That is their job, that's the entire reason that they're there. It is much better to have people in that than it is to have people at home, which is kind of the crux of my submission, I suppose. The one-way door policy, by bringing that forward again, you're just keeping people in an environment. I don't think that's, in relatives, I don't think it's an issue, because I think there's only one place that's open past 2 a.m. consistently anyway, in Hawke's Bay or Napier. But there may be the odd one sporadically for certain occasions, New Year's Eve, etc. But there's only one place, so what's the one-way door policy going to do there? So, so if I just go through my things just to make sure I cover them all off. Probably the only comment I make from an off-premise outlet point of view is that it's nice to see some consistency with bottle stores and grocery. I think for too long, supermarkets were able to sell alcohol when other places weren't, and their excuse is always, well, somebody's there buying some groceries, so they might as well get beer at the same time. So nice to see some consistency. I note that there seem to be more new restrictions for on-licence venues than off-licence venues, so I thought that was strange that we're trying to restrict that further. Again, come back to my point, as it is a controlled environment. That's pretty much all I had to say. I think we need these venues, we need them operating. There are plenty of people that want to carry on. They might have been somewhere, been out somewhere for dinner, they want to go somewhere afterwards and they want to stay out a bit later. I think if we stop that, I think Napier can often be a ghost town, and I don't think that reducing this sort of thing will ever help at all. That's me.
Thank you, Shay. I'll just open up for any questions from councillors. I think your submission was very clear in terms of the points that you wanted to make, so I appreciate the time that you've taken.
No worries. So it was really roughly written, so I'm surprised you could read it. All right, okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Shay. Our next submission is Shane Phillips, Hospitality New Zealand, who is via Zoom. And I see we do have a Shane. Here we go. Welcome, Shane.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys. So I am the Regional Manager for Hospitality New Zealand, looking after the Lower North Island, which obviously includes the wonderful Hawke's Bay. Hospitality New Zealand, we've been around for 120 odd years. We are a member-led non-for-profit organisation. We represent about 2,500 businesses, including cafes, restaurants, bars, clubs, nightclubs, commercial accommodation, country hotels and off-licence. Our vision is to see hospitality recognised and celebrated for its contribution to Aotearoa, attracting fresh talent and generating sustainable returns for businesses and communities. Obviously, sort of the main point of my submission there was against the reduction of hours for the on-licence. We firmly believe that a well-run on-licence environment are part of the solution to addressing the alcohol-related harm in New Zealand. This was supported by NCC staff at the stakeholders meeting on March 31st. In my time, the 18 months that I've been in this role, one of the most exciting things that I've seen is a significant rise in the attendees for our host responsibility training in the Hawke's Bay region, showing a clear commitment to reduce alcohol harm in venues and communities. And these sessions have been well attended by staff from the tri-agencies, which shows a clear understanding of the benefits and training of working together for a positive outcome. So we do not believe that the closing hours for non-licensed venues in Napier will meaningfully minimise alcohol-related harm in line with the objective of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. Hospitality New Zealand believes a well-run licensed venues plays a key role in supporting safe and responsible consumption of alcohol by reducing on-premise hours. There is a risk that pushes consumption of alcohol to unlicensed environments, potentially working against the council's aims to reducing alcohol-related harm. One of the issues that was obviously raised through other areas has been that we do have a culture of preloading. The last thing that we want to see is introduced into our regions is post-loading, is that venues are closing too early. People are used to carrying on to a certain time, so we don't want to move these issues out of a controlled environment. Obviously, you guys are well aware. You're one of 12 great wine regions of the world. Your recovery post Gabrielle has been amazing and been applauded. The last thing that we want to do is see business go backwards there. It's been amazing to be part of and see some of the recoveries that have happened there. Now, in regards to, whether, what happens between 2 and 3 a.m., it doesn't change the outlook of these businesses in regards to the way that they run them. The rules are the rules, the laws are the laws. We apply the laws regardless of the time of day, whether it's between 10 and 11 a.m. in the morning, it's the same set of laws as what it is between 2 and 3. So it doesn't change the outlook of the business, the way we operate during those times. In regards to the one-way door restrictions, we do not believe a one-way door policy is an effective tool for alcohol harm minimisation. It can present safety issues, separating groups and resulting in congesting of crowds outside closing venues rather than a natural dispersion. Obviously, our recommendations there are obviously to recommend retaining the existing closing time of 3 a.m. for unlicensed hospitality venues. We strongly recommend keeping the closing times for venues in line with those in Hastings or surrounding areas. The last thing you want to do is create a vacuum. We strongly recommend caution when proceeding with any discretionary conditions. I am free for any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much, Shane. Just wanting to check, you are aware that Hastings is actually consulting on an on-licence 1 a.m. closure time?
I would have to double check that. Yeah.
So we are.
I deal with 24 different councils,
Yeah.
so sometimes things can get jumbled a little. But I know that when I did speak with Hastings, there was a concern there of keeping things in line with Napier.
Yes, and that's certainly a concern that we've discussed between the two councils, but we are consulting on different closure times at this point in time. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. One other question from me. So you've noted that you deal with 24 different councils, so a number of different towns and cities. What is the more common on-licence closing time across all the various hospitality businesses that are within your Orohi?
The most common one in my region would be between 2 and 3 a.m. is the most common one. But I don't deal, for example, with the Wellington CBD. So I am dealing with generally the smaller areas. So I don't deal with any of the major councils, which tend to be the 4 a.m. and...
Thank you, that's useful. Do you deal with other areas that would be considered to be tourist cities, as we are?
Not if you include Palmerston North.
Oh, look, okay, we'll be kind. Yes, they're a tourist city. They're a student city, which is probably equally as valid.
Yeah, I've spent a bit of time up there the last week, so they would argue differently. But no, you are my biggest tourist region by a country mile. I mean, you're the food and wine capital of New Zealand.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Price.
Is there any chance you'd know what the closing times are in Tauranga?
I don't deal with Tauranga directly. I know that they recently, I think it was last year, they voted in with their LAP, and I think it was reducing from 3 till 2, I believe. But they were also looking at doing different times between Tauranga and Mount Maunganui, which was a concern because they didn't want everyone, for example, leaving the Mount and racing to Tauranga to get in that last hour. But I don't deal with that area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boag.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Just the point you last raised about having the different hours, do you think there is a danger if Hastings is closing it in 1 or 2 hours earlier than us, that it could be that we have an influx of Hastings people come over here, possibly, after a night's drinking already?
100%. People are used to going through to a certain time, and if they're going to want to continue to carry on with those habits, and if it's taken away from one area, then they're going to flock to the next area.
Right, another question, please. I noted in your submission, you said that there's no relevant evidence to support proposals to reduce closing times for hospitality venues because the police evidence highlighted the fact that the vast majority of alcohol-related harm is happening outside of. Now, we have some quite firm evidence put in front of us that, quote, reduced late night trading hours are likely to reduce violence, and the evidence of impact on hospitality is scant. So we obviously were looking at different pieces of evidence, but it seems fairly firm from as far as the police is concerned. I appreciate that reducing the hours of trade means reducing the amount of money that's being spent, but it is of concern to me that you challenge this when you say there's no relevant evidence when we have been given relevant evidence to support that claim.
Just a point of order. There's stats in there that show the crime rate around the hotels is earlier than the closing time you're talking about. More crime around 11 to 12 o'clock than at 3 o'clock. So your question was slightly misleading.
My question was a quote from the evidence that we were given that, quote, reduced late night trading hours likely to reduce violence and the evidence of impact on hospitality is scant.
So just an answer to that is there's facts of crime rate that are facts that the crime rate is earlier.
It's not a matter of earlier or later or whatever.
Shane, I will provide you with an opportunity to respond to that if you would like to.
Just in my response, the way that a lot of that data is collected is, that an incident is related to, is alcohol related. Yes, it's an alcohol harm incident, but there's no actual data collecting by the police to say, look, this was an incident in this unlicensed venue. So this is where some of that information can be misforming. If you use Wellington, for example, there's data collected by the police there to, alcohol harm-related incidents in the area, but they do not relate to the actual venue. So these incidents are happening and are being recorded, but they're not directly related to the venues. And many times they are youth of 16, 17 years old who have not accessed any of these venues, but have had access to alcohol and have caused harm in the community.
Thank you, Shane. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Just wondering if you could articulate on your answer to question H of the submission, which talks about the discretionary conditions. Can you articulate a little bit more about your concern about the list of discretionary conditions?
So, obviously, I've done a list there of the certain things that are concerned about, the use of outdoor areas after a certain time. Restricting such areas would force people out onto the streets and outside of controlled licensed areas for things like vaping and cigarettes. The non-serving of glass containers at specified times can create confusion and cost for venues. It also limits the purchase of wine or no alcohol 0% bottled products. Obviously brings sustainability practices into question there. I've spoken about the one-way door restrictions there. Serve reduction systems, we believe a well-managed event can maintain a responsible service of alcohol without requiring attendees to queue for longer periods of time, causing frustration and having a negative effect on the experience of those who are attending. That one in particular has obviously come up a lot. You guys do a lot of amazing events in the Hawke's Bay, and we understand the need for good control over the crowd and that, but reducing drinks down to like a one-drink policy and stuff, that it's going to draw away from the event, and obviously people don't want to be queuing and missing the events that they're attending. The provision for additional security staff after specified times, like there are some venues that clearly do an amazing job at making sure they have the correct amount of security to operate within their means. But for other venues, there is no need for them. They've never had any incidents and stuff in that. It's a completely different crowd. And so such a provision will cause an unnecessary cost to a business. And obviously, and then the final one was the provision for transport for patrons. That transport options are clearly displayed as part of the licensing requirements already.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Just through you, Madam Mayor. The comment you made earlier about different closing times in different cities and potentially creating a vacuum if one closes earlier, they're all going to jump in transport and go across to the other city. If the place they were going to had, say, a cover charge of $10, are people likely to race across there for an hour?
Yeah, look, I believe they still would, because it's, it's what they're used to doing. It's, and I don't think that's going to be a deterrent for them if there's a cover charge.
For an hour.
And it's, it's the same, if the licenses are in line with each other, the people wouldn't be travelling. They would still continue to stay out until 3 a.m. because generally that's, what they're used to doing.
Thank you, and I guess we're asking you for some opinions here, so thank you for being happy to share those opinions. And I guess equally, it may be that people just choose to go out from the beginning of the night into the city that has the longer opening hours, as opposed to doing the dash from one to the next at 1 a.m. in the morning. So there's all sorts of scenarios here which we need to consider as part of our decision making.
And my main point is, is ideally you want people to be in a safe environment, and we stand by the statement that there is no safer environment for people to consume alcohol than a well-run business.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you for your submission and your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Okay. Next up, we have Georgia Miles from Napier Council Youth Council here to present the Youth Council submission. Welcome, Georgia.
Hi, my name's Georgia Miles. I know a lot of you already. So a bit of background, I'm the chairperson of the Napier Youth Council, and because I'm interested in public health, I joined the Joint Alcohol Strategy Advisory Group last year, and then this year we established a subcommittee for Youth Council to work towards the local alcohol policy. So, first up, are there enough alcohol outlets in Napier? Yes, there's definitely enough. There are lots of restaurants, bars and wineries, and alcohol is quite accessible. And obviously our wineries attract tourists and are a big economic driver for the region, and we do recognise that. Are there any areas in Napier where you view there are currently too many or too few places that sell alcohol? So having a look at some of the research documents that were provided with the submission, Onikawa and Mariwa suburbs have similar levels of deprivation to Maraenui, but there's no restriction on the number of off-licence venues there. And looking at like the ED presentation rate of alcohol-related harm, Mariwa has the highest, more than Maraenui that has that restriction on the off-licences. In terms of other places where alcohol should be restricted, any areas that there's lots of young people, so major areas would be schools and playgrounds, and then obviously places that are near alcohol ban areas like Anderson Park and places where also lots of young people hang out. We support the proposal to restrict further bottle stores in Maraenui because of the higher alcohol harm related to the higher deprivation. But we do recognise that Napier is actually quite a small city, and it's quite easy to drive 5 minutes to another suburb. So in terms of the efficacy of that in the long term, it isn't necessarily going to be the most effective, but not opening any further is definitely the way forward. And you can also buy alcohol online now. And the reduction of closing hours from 3 to 2 a.m. We support the reduction in trading hours for these venues because the data, again, showed that the alcohol-related incidents decreased significantly after closing hours. So if we close earlier, then potentially there might be a reduction in the alcohol-related incidents a bit earlier in the night. In terms of grocery stores, this was a quite drastic reduction in trading hours. which means that lots of people won't be able to buy alcohol before work if they work a 9 to 5, and there's not that many hours after work that they can buy it either. And while that's like quite an inconvenience, I actually think that's a good thing. Inconveniences help to change behaviours, and that's kind of the idea of the local alcohol policy, is to change people's behaviours around alcohol harm. So it could be a motivator for some people to not buy alcohol at all just because it's purely inconvenient. One-way door restriction, so we currently do have that, and to maintain that, we would have to move it back an hour. And I think that's beneficial. It encourages winding down of the night a bit earlier, and also prevents highly intoxicated people from entering other venues late at night, further reducing harm. In terms of discretionary terms, there were a lot, but I did actually read all of them eventually. And we agree with all the proposed discretionary terms. I'd like to place emphasis on about advertising and off licenses, because advertising easily influences younger and impressionable minds, especially when it comes to RTDs, which are flavoured and targeted towards teenagers and younger adults. Another discretionary term that could also be added to the special licence conditions would be around like closing the bar before the concert or event ends, so sort of like a one-way door policy, like closing the bar earlier. And that would reduce people's access to alcohol at the end of the night, reducing the amount of harm that they can do towards the end. Because I went to a concert in Auckland, and that was one of the things that they had. It did close earlier than the actual event. So in terms of additional comments, obviously I'm 17, so I actually can't legally buy alcohol. But as young people, there are limited events that are specifically targeted to us. Every time we do like feedback from young people, they're like, there's never enough events for us, blah, 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 blah. And quite often council hosts events that are either targeted to younger children or to adults. So an example of that was last year in November, we had Whānau Fun Fest at Anderson Park, and on the same day there was Collins Street Festival, which was an R18 event because of all of the alcohol venues. So one's being targeted towards children and the other's R18. So there's like a grey area for teenagers. There's not like heaps of events specifically targeted towards us where we can have fun but also be safe. And another example of that was at Laneway Festival in Auckland. So initially 16 and 17-year-olds could buy tickets, but then because of the discretionary terms in the special licence for that event, they were not allowed to attend, so they had to get refunds. And I know people that were like directly affected by that. And it's a difficult situation because from an alcohol harm reduction perspective, it makes sense to not allow teenagers to events where they serve alcohol. But because of this, there are often no events for young people. When issuing special licenses, young people need to be considered, whether that being have alcohol-free areas at events or separate wristband colours. Young people tend to drink RTDs because of the range of flavours, and they also taste like fizzy drinks. Not that I drink RTDs or anything, but like people do. And also reducing the number of RTDs for sale at events would make it less attractive for young people to purchase alcohol. So that's the end of the submission that the Youth Council put together, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Georgia. Open up for questions. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Kia ora, Georgia. Thank you for your submission and all your reading and very thoughtful responses as well. I just wanted to tease out a little bit more around your comments with events and targeting young people. I remember that you guys rock on up in front of us at least once a year and ask for a little bit of a pocket of money to promote and encourage people to come up with ideas for youth events. So I wanted to ask you what sort of feedback or where are you guys at with that at the moment, because when you look at a Collins Festival, which I understand Collins Street Festival was actually a privately run event, not council. Whānau Fest absolutely is part of the 150. So how are you guys using your influence, your ideas to deliver youth events in our city?
So currently as a youth council, we're planning for Youth Week, which is coming up in about 3 weeks' time. We've got a couple of events for that, which are, of course, alcohol-free. And then in terms of our youth events fund, we do have a couple of events that are coming up, and those are also both going to be alcohol-free. So it was in the conditions of the, like, applying for the grant that the event that you had to hold I believe there was a term that it had to be an alcohol-free event for it to be targeted at young people. But again, we don't have that much scope to have like heaps and heaps of events, and some of them are quite niche as well.
And can you give us an example of a good event that you can use as an exemplar of where young people are involved in, I guess, around alcohol, but obviously not consuming?
I guess an example of that would be like at New Year's when we had like the concert and stuff down at the Sound Shell, there were bars and stuff open that people could go drink, I think. I don't really know. I was there, but like that was a nice event. And I know at Art Deco, I actually didn't go into town, but I do believe there were lots of drunk young people because they all preloaded, which isn't great. But yeah, the kind of problem is if there is alcohol at places, people do get their parents and older friends to buy alcohol for them. Like when I went to the 660 concert, see that's a good example. When I went to the 660 concert back in 2022, so I was 14, I knew friends who were also 14 that had managed to get their mates to buy them alcohol, and it was RTDs. And in fact, they actually advertised the alcohol that they were selling on all of the screens, like in between the acts. So that would be like another example of advertising, where, yeah, then young people were able to obtain alcohol and get quite drunk.
Councillor Bogue.
Thank you very much for that excellent submission. You did a lot of research, and it's great to see our city's young leaders taking such a responsible position. But I wanted to ask you, you did mention about advertising and exposure of alcohol, people drinking alcohol and advertising alcohol affecting young people in terms of their own likely to start drinking earlier and drinking more hazardously. I just wanted to run something by you. Wairoa District Council, and I think there are others, have got provisions in their LAP restricting the availability of alcohol at events which are child-focused, such as school galas and kapahaka events, children's sports games, in which they say licences won't be granted for these child-centred events, so that you don't have the mix of adults drinking on this child-focused event. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because, I mean, in terms of if we're looking like to the future, the reason that young people start drinking is because it's normalised in their families. Like if they've grown up watching their parents drink and it's been normalised, then when they go to ask their parents, oh, would I be able to get you to buy me some for the weekend? They're like, oh, yeah, sure. And then they have drinking buddies. So I've probably grown up in a less conventional household. Not that it's like unconventional, but less normal, where my parents actually don't drink. So it's never been normalised, oh yeah, it's perfectly acceptable to get really drunk on the weekend and get a bit tipsy in a bit. So yeah, where there's events where there's adults and there's kids, there shouldn't be that role modelling for people, because then, yeah, young people are so impressionable, especially like at our age, we're like sponges. So we absorb everything around us, and if we see like our role models and see that it's accepted, then that just creates further cycles. And that's not even just in areas of high deprivation, that happens at all layers of society. You have your wine mums and their wine daughters.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Georgia. Appreciate your time, and you obviously put a lot of thought and work into the submission along with your subcommittee, so please extend our thanks to the rest of them.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
And I'll probably be seeing you next month at another submission.
Yes, you
Yes.
Oh, thanks, Georgia.
Okay, our next submitters are Chris and Kerry Sullivan from the Thirsty Whale. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah.
You come up, Kerry. Good morning. This is my wife, Kerry.
Hi.
I'm probably the oldest public in Hawke's Bay, so I've got a little bit of knowledge of 43 years, and I think I probably only own the latest operation that will be mostly affected. I've done quite a good submission, or large submission. Hopefully you've read it, and if you wish to ask me any questions on it. I suppose the first thing is, if Napier closed later than Hastings, would people drive? And I disagree with the hospitality guy, because we are 18k away. It's a $100 Uber ride. 90% of our people that arrive on and I think our camera footage can show this, most people get dropped off by Uber. Very few people park outside. You can look outside at 1:30, 2 o'clock. There would be 6 or 7 cars parked out the front of us. There is a few parks in Gintrap car park, but very few. So 90% of our people are Ubers. Do I believe somebody at 1 o'clock is going to jump in a $100 Uber to come to Napier? No, I don't. And then pay another $10. And plus, we have the 1 o'clock, we have the 2 o'clock door close as well. So I don't believe having a difference of an hour between the two cities is going to affect it. I think it will benefit us, that we will probably get people coming over earlier and staying the night, which would be better for everybody. It puts everybody in one controlled environment. We have 12 security. I'll put on my submission. I have a bar in Wanaka, which does a similar turnover we do. They have 1 security. It's just a different clientele. They don't have gangs like we've got here, unfortunately. So it's I've got a fairly good. I had bars in Wellington, and similar clientele to what we've got here in Hastings, or Napier and Hastings. So we had a lot of security in our Wellington bar as well, the residents. I had a bar in Wanganui, and now that had a 2 o'clock closing. We struggled to get people to come to the late venue. We struggled to pay enough security because we couldn't charge more than $5 because we had to close at 2 o'clock. The nightclub there failed. It didn't work. It was very hard to try and get it going. We tried for 4 years of owning it to work it. Eventually, we just didn't run the nightclub at all. We just run a bar, which closed about 12 o'clock. So I think Napier, being a tourism town, needs a late venue. I'm not sure if I can ask Ray to vouch, but we do have a very good rapport with the police, and we're very happy with the police, and we're happy with the police response that we get. They're very, very proactive with us. We have a fantastic camera system and a scanning system. So when people come to our venue, I've supplied pictures. There is 2 security guards which work at the courthouse through the week that stand and do intoxication and ID. Once they get through those 2, they go to another system which is called Patron Scan. This picks up false IDs, underage, if they've managed to get past the first one, which they normally don't, and takes a photo and holds their information. This information is held for 3 months in the cloud. If that person causes trouble inside, we have their details, which we can give to the police. We have their license, a photo of them. We also have 104 cameras around the property. So we have cameras everywhere, except the toilets. But we do have them in all the public areas of the toilets, because we do have trouble where people walk in the doors and things like occasionally. Most of our instances are caused domestics, which are going to happen whether they happen with us or at home. Our alcohol incident rate, I think, for when we have 650 odd people through on a Saturday night in Rocksoft nightclub, we are lucky or unlucky if we have 1 or 2 incidences. And normally that is that somebody's drunk too much a little bit. We do take care of them. We make sure that they either ring their parents, which happens once every couple of months. If you've got a 19-year-old that's obviously new to drinking, it might just have a little bit too much. Unfortunately, these days, it's hard to tell the difference between alcohol and drugs. And drugs is a huge problem nationwide. So it doesn't matter whether you have a liquor license or not. It's not going to. We're never going to stop that issue. So some of our young ones, we're not sure when we have to call an ambulance, which happens 4 or 5 times a year, 5 or 6 times a year. And any late liquor license, which is the only one in Napier, is going to have these incidents because we're going to have those people that want to take drugs come to our venue as well. We address it very quickly. We ring the ambulance. We have staff that stay with them. We are a controlled environment. These people will not get this attention if they're at home partying or somebody else's place around Napier after hours. Do I believe people want to keep on partying after 3 o'clock? Yes, they do. Some do. But I think if we cut the hours back too early, people will carry on partying in their cars, in their homes, parties around town. It's going to become uncontrolled environment. There will be more police call-outs and more issues with the hospitals. We are very, very strict on intoxication. And of course, we're going to get some people that do get intoxicated, all ages. But if you have a look at my stats, we show you that our age group, which comes in a patron scan, which I submitted to you, this page here shows you the age demographics. 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds is our biggest group that we get. If I was, which I am, a father of a 20-year-old now, I would rather have my daughter in a controlled environment than at some party, somebody either leading her to a bedroom because she's on drugs or alcohol. That doesn't happen with us. We have 12 security, which I've also shown in my submission, which are COA security licensed. We get checked probably once to twice a year by DIA and the police. We just recently had one where all our staff passed. These guys are controlled or trained to be in a controlled environment to check on people's alcohol condition, what stage of alcohol they're at. If we find somebody we think are a little bit getting over the alcohol, we put them on water straight away and we watch them. That will not happen if it's not in a controlled environment. You're going to get these poor kids, 18, 19, that still want to party. I'm sure most councillors here, when they're 18, 19, 20, some 20, because it would have been 20 back in the drinking age, wanted to go out and party to 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning in some stage in your life. Why should you take that away from the up-and-coming 18, 19, 20-year-olds now? I don't think it's fair that we should be putting these young ones out into an uncontrolled environment. Any questions?
Thank you, Chris. I'll open up for any questions. Councillor Price.
My first question is, have you noticed any change in the disorder or behaviour since the gang patch laws come in?
Huge difference. I was actually talking to Ray just before, saying it's incredibly, I think it's the best law that's been brought in for a long time. We used to have Munga Mob, not so much Black Power, we don't see Black Power very often, but we used to have Munga Mob members. One shot at me 3 years ago. So they used to hang out with their patches on, they used to feel tough. It's not so much them that used to cause the trouble, except for the one that shot at us. It's the hangers-on that used to hang around them trying to be tough. Since the patch law's been in, we don't see any gang members at all in patches. They're probably there, but we just don't see them. They don't feel tough anymore. They don't want to stand out. Because they're not there, we don't get all the hangers-on at all like we used to. We used to get carloads just parking outside, parking down the road, intimidating people. That's all stopped pretty well. We do get some 14, 16-year-old kids that obviously want to pinch cars hanging around. Every town's got those. And I don't think you can do anything about it. They get locked up, they're back out the next day. And the same kids are turning up week after week. We know them, we watch them, but that's all we can do. But it's definitely less. The gang patch law has been fantastic for us. It's really reduced the amount of people hanging out the front.
Just a supplementary to that. So would you, I think I questioned Councillor Bogue about the main time for things happening is sort of prior to midnight, but would you say that these figures could have changed a bit since the gang patch? Has there been less disorder or offences?
Well, I've got a police data here for Ahuriri. It's police data. most problems are 11 o'clock, 11 p.m. The least problems is 3 and 4 by a huge amount. That's police data. I did put it in my submission. So we have noticed a huge difference because of the gang rule, gang patch thing, definitely. But you've still got the kids. You're always going to get the kids, but not a lot of them. We're talking 5 or 6, 7 kids that mum and dad should be looking after, but they're not. I don't know where they come from, but...
And my last question is, from your data, can you tell me, we've talked about people that have been out to parties, weddings, and then coming to your premises. Can your data show that you do get a lot of people that are out-of-towners or tourists?
Yes, we do. Our patron scan picks up on their licence where they come from. Normally 15 to 20% of our patrons are new every week, which are out-of-towners. We have our regulars, 40 to 60% of regulars that come every week. There's nowhere else to go. They're well behaved because they know once we scan their licence, hold it. It does go if they don't cause any trouble. We look, but obviously they scan every week. It goes in. But if you're an out-of-town person, you come. We don't know who you are. You scan. You come in size and you cause trouble. We can ban you. That then goes into our system, which is nationwide and Australia. So I get rung up once a month from people who have shifted from New Zealand who have been caused trouble at our bar. We have a few. We have, in our system, we've got over 2,000 people banned for different reasons, mostly because they're gang-related or gang-affiliated, or have caused some sort of a trouble by abusing our staff or whatever. Then that's over the last 10 years. So we're talking 200 incidences a year, which is maximum of somebody causing trouble, or we've got it from somebody else's bar as well. So that it's not just all our 2,000 from our one bar, it's all over New Zealand, but we have everybody's in it. So when we ban them, they can't come back. So if you have a bouncer on the door who changes the following week, he won't remember that person from the week before. The machine never forgets. So that person comes in and scans, they're a troublemaker, or they've caused trouble, or they're underage, they've got a false ID. There's different reasons. A lot of them are false IDs. These are 17-year-old kids that have changed their licences. The machine picks them up straight away. And that's probably was the biggest problem we had 2 years ago. We had a place in town that was changing licences for kids and doing a very good job. The naked eye would not pick it up, but the machine does. So we were getting 5 and 6 of those a night coming through. That was 17-year-old. I mean, a 17-year-old, 8-year-old look the same. They're pretty hard to decide what the difference. So once we get that person in the system, we ban them for 2 years, sometimes 6 months, depending on what they do. If they get a bit lippy or whatever, it's a 6-month ban. They normally, once they come back, behave themselves. Sometimes they never get back in again. But what I was saying, I get rung from Australia asking me to please remove my ban because I can't get into pubs in Australia. I said, no, you're banned for 2 years, I'm leaving it in there. You want to cause trouble, you pay the price.
Thank you.
So it does work well as a deterrent.
Kia ora. Thank you for your submission, and I'm really impressed at the lengths that you go to keep your patrons safe. Thank you, it's brilliant. I'm interested, you said you've been a publican for quite a long time. Has there been a change in closing times in the past whilst you've been operating?
No, not in any pub that I've owned. I've bought, so I had Wanganui, I bought it with a 2 o'clock closing, and we tried to run a nightclub there, and we have to have our staff work late. You've got to pay them well. No one wants to work 11 to 2 o'clock unless you're getting paid $40 an hour minimum. To do that, you can't. You either got to sell more alcohol, which is really why we're here. We don't want to sell any more than we have to, or you have to have a cover charge. So a cover charge covers the staff. And to give an example, Roxoff has a $10 cover. It took a little while to accept. Everybody accepts it now. And if you come at 1:30, people are happy to pay $10. 2 o'clock, we're getting niggly. People saying, oh, it's only an hour left. Well, it's just tough. Come earlier. That's our argument. I think 3 o'clock is a fair time for a nightclub to close. Nightclub is a word for night. It's a late venue. If you want a nightclub in Napier, you've got to have a late closing venue. If you don't want to be a nightclub in Napier, close it down. But we are very controlled and run it properly. And all you're doing is moving the problem to somewhere else.
Yeah, a supplementary. Just curious about your experience in Wanganui. Do you think there may have been other factors other than closing time around why that club didn't work, or do you think it's purely the closing time?
Wanganui is a very hard town to run. It's a nice town, I don't get me wrong, there's some beautiful people there. It has got a gang problem, and you need security. As I say, give an example, Wanaka, very busy bar. We own the busiest bar in Wanaka on the lakefront, similar figures to what we do here, and we have one security. We have no trouble. Wanganui, we used to run 3 security, we'd have trouble. We couldn't afford to put any more on because we couldn't charge any more on the door. Napier, to give an example, I won't put Napier and Wanganui in the same category, but Napier still has gangs issues. We don't see the gangs anywhere near like we used to because of the gang patch rule, which is great. But we do have trouble, of course we do, like any venue has some trouble. But because we have so many security, and they're big boys, and they're all, I'm not saying because they work at the courthouse they know the troublemakers, but sometimes they do, which is a good thing. But even the troublemakers behave themselves. If they want to have some fun and go at their wives, and we're talking guys that have been troubled their whole life, they got married, they got kids, you got to give them a second chance. And I don't rate people who they are. If a guy turns up, he's got tattoos all up his neck, I don't judge him. He can be the nicest guy. The next guy come in could be the little wee, fair, white, blonde little chappie that looks like butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, and he causes the most trouble. You just can't pick who's going to cause trouble these days. In 42 years, I'm pretty good at picking people. I have got it wrong occasionally. But, yeah, people these days, if they want to go out and have a bit of fun, especially when they want to go out with their wives or whatever, they do behave. We do have a culture of, when you look at our stats, our biggest age group is 18-year-old girls. Nearly 100. Out of 600 people that come through, 100 of them is 18-year-old girls. So my biggest concern is when that girl walks out of our club. So we have 4 or 5 security that stay outside and watch and make sure they get into a Uber. We still have mum and dads that pick and drop their kids off. I used to own a nightclub called Snobs in Hastings many years ago, and we're going back 35, 40 years ago. We used to have back in those days, the drinking age was 20. We used to have police that used to drop their 18-year-old daughters off, and I can say this because all these police would be well retired by now, because they knew that they were dropping their 18-year-old daughter to a controlled environment. They were underage, but we knew them. And I knew the police, and they said, we'd rather have our daughter here than going to a party in town. And I think that's why we see so many under 20s, 18, 19-year-old girls coming to us. And it shows on our stats. The oldest people have is 55. We've probably got about 10 of them. And then you go down to 51, 44, 40s. So predominantly we are catering to the younger market. We need to make sure our younger market is safe and kept safe. And if you're going to put them on the street at 2 o'clock, they ain't going to go home. They're going to go out and party somewhere else. You're going to have more attacks, more assaults on younger girls and I'll say younger boys as well, but predominantly younger girls. At least with us, they're in a controlled environment where they are getting Ubered home at 3 o'clock and mum and dad are picking them up. And they're not going to stop wanting to party. Just remember when you were 18 and 19 what you wanted to do.
Councillor Crystal.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, just a question. One of your neighbours has done a submission and it's about the mess left behind on...
It's Dennis?
Yeah. So I'm obviously not down there at 3 in the morning anymore. I have been in the past, but a long time ago. But do you clean... What happens with the cleaning
Our staff...
up?
Well, I think you have to ask the people from Shed 5. Our staff walk around at 3 o'clock and pick up. And these people are not all ours. These are people that are parking in cars in Lever Street. Not all of them, but some of them we don't even let in. And they are preloading and they throw their cans out. That's going to happen wherever you... I'm sure you get it in Hastings Street as well. But we do send our bouncers at 3 o'clock. 3 of them walk around with rubbish cans and pick everything up. And we've done that because Lever Street neighbours have asked us. Now, I went to court against... Dennis tried to take our licence off us 3 years ago. He stood up and said Chris Sullivan's the best operator in town, which really went against what he was trying to say to the hearing at the time. We make sure our area is tidy. We run 2 of the biggest restaurants in town the next day, right in that area. Why would I want to mess outside my Cork and Barrel restaurant, which is busy, and Thirsty Whale is the busiest restaurant in Hawke's Bay. We turn over $10 million in that restaurant a year. That's a lot of meals. We do a lot of meals because we run a good operation. Do I want people parking, getting out in cans on Sunday morning? No. So we bottles, we pick them all up. Dennis has just been in the business too long, and I'm happy to say that. He probably needs to retire. As I am too shortly, and I can say that about myself. We are both old publicans that probably have been in the business too long. But Dennis has got 20 years on me.
I am conscious of time, but I'm happy to take one more. Councillor Bogue?
Yes, thank you very much. You did say most of your patrons are sort of 18 to 20. Is that a significant, the ones that you send home in Ubers and all that sort of thing?
Well, I've put 2 pictures of the Ubers parked outside our place at 3 o'clock. There's a queue of them, like 30, 40 Ubers down the road. That's changed. Pre-Ubers, we never had enough taxis. Go back 10 years ago.
So why I'm asking you is that they're obviously not tourists. They're people who live locally, basically. So most of the people who come to your bar at that age would be living locally.
I don't think I could say that. No, we have a lot of young, like school holidays just gone. They're not locals anymore. They're out of town university students that live in Dunedin, Christchurch, Wellington. They're 18, 19-year-old, and we have a huge influx of school holidays from kids that come back to see mum and dad or bring friends with them. So they're not all locals, no. Our hard, I would say, 20 to 30 age group are regulars because I know them. The 18-year-old kids, they all look the same to me. They look like kids. Yes, they do because they're 18, but I am 62 years old. I'm allowed to say they look like kids. We have, as I said to you, about a 25% out-of-town tourist market on our scanner that says these people are not local. So it depends what their licence says. If they are a local, but they live in Dunedin, they still may have a local licence, but they don't live here. So it's a bit hard to pick how many of them are. But what I'm trying to say to you is, if I had an 18-year-old daughter, whether she was local or not, I'd want her to be safe. And she's not going to be safe at somebody's party down the road with no control.
Okay, I'm going to draw it to a close just in the interest of time, but thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you for the submissions that you've made. Thank you for your time today and answering the many questions that have been put to you. Much appreciated. Thank you. Our next submitter is online, and we have Ashley Rhodes, Ian Bain, and Christopher Lefevre. I apologise if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Legal counsel for Foodstuff New Zealand. So, welcome. Ian, is it?
Yes, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Yes, my name's Ian Bain. I'm a lawyer who does a lot of legal work for Foodstuffs North Island Limited, and in my travels for them, I've done quite a bit of work helping them out with alcohol licensing issues across the North Island. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make some submissions for Foodstuffs North Island in relation to your proposal to change your LAP. You've no doubt had a chance to have a read through Foodstuffs North Island's written submission, and there are only a few matters that Foodstuffs has wanted to submit on. Firstly, though, a little bit of background that hopefully you're all reasonably well aware of, the way that supermarkets and grocery stores work when they are licensed. They're quite different from other licenses, quite different from bottle stores in particular. Supermarkets, grocery stores are subject to some specific restrictions under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. The most important of those, perhaps, is the limitation on the types of alcohol that can be sold in a licensed supermarket or grocery store. They're limited to beer, wine, or mead. Not many of the stores actually sell any honey mead, but they are entitled to. And of course, you've seen them all selling cider. That's a kind of fruit wine. And they're also limited to the level of alcohol in those products that they can sell. It's got to be 15% or less as a percentage of alcohol. Importantly, too, the stores have to have all of their alcohol displays, promotions, all in one part of the store, the single alcohol area. And that single alcohol area cannot be at the entrance to the store or at the checkouts, the two parts of the store that every customer has to go through. They can't have their alcohol there. The single alcohol area in each store is defined by the District Licensing Committee. The committee has to make a decision on where the alcohol needs to be, and when doing that, they have to have regard to the purpose of limiting, as far as reasonably practicable, the exposure of shoppers in the store to alcohol. So as a result, supermarkets and grocery stores cannot have any displays or advertising for alcohol on the exterior of their premises. In addition, and importantly, for no supermarket or grocery store is the sale of alcohol their main business. They can't get a license if it's their main business, because then they would become a bottle store and the rules are all different. Even for the smaller stores, the 4 squares, those grocery stores cannot get a license unless they can establish to the committee's satisfaction that their main business is the sale of food. And for food, it excludes confectionery, heated, ready-to-eat meals. All those things are out of the list. So a grocery store's main business will be food. Alcohol, just like in a supermarket, is only a complementary sale to the sale of food. And indeed, across foodstuffs stores, the vast majority of customers who buy any alcohol will buy that alcohol as part of a much larger basket of goods, food and general groceries, with alcohol just as a tack on. For all those reasons, the level of risk posed by supermarkets and grocery store licenses is quite different than that from a bottle store. In a bottle store, of course, there is an incentive in a bottle store to make an alcohol sale, because that's how they make their money. Supermarkets and grocery stores have no incentive to make a risky alcohol sale. Keeping their licensed through doing that is a substantial detriment, because the way that a supermarket and grocery store positions itself in the market, of course, is a one-stop shop, a convenient offering where a customer can get everything. So if they can't sell alcohol, they can't provide that convenience. They don't wish to lose their license, and they don't need to make risky alcohol sales, because, as I said before, their primary business is the sale of food and groceries. What that means is that the staff in foodstuffs stores are well trained on their obligations in relation to safe and responsible sale of alcohol, and they're also all told not to make risky sales. They're told to err on the side of declining. If there is a customer who appears that they might be intoxicated, or they might have been drinking earlier in the day, the staff are all told to reject that sale, to err on the side of safety. Say no to sales, not only for underage people or intoxicated people, but also to say no to sales to people whose purchasing practices might indicate an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And indeed, the stores do take that step at times. They will reject sales to people where they are concerned about the way in which the person is buying alcohol. That's the background. And against that, the first of the proposed elements in your draft local alcohol policy that Foodstuffs wants to submit on is in relation to the maximum trading hours for supermarkets and grocery stores. At the moment, under your current joint policy, it's 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. are the maximum hours, and the proposal is to reduce those down to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. The Foodstuffs stores haven't seen any evidence that the sale of alcohol from their stores early in the morning, between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., leads to any particular risk or any increase in the risk for the sale of alcohol. Stores sell at that time of the morning to customers primarily who enjoy a quieter store, but it's not only those customers who find it convenient to shop at that time of the morning. For a number of those customers at that time of the morning, it's the only time that they can shop to fit around work, family, childcare, or other community obligations or involvement. And they want to do a full family grocery shop at that time of the morning, and that might include some beer or some wine. As you know, the Act requires a reasonable system of control. The Parliament did not pass the Act with any aim of reducing overall consumption of alcohol. The Act aims to minimise only alcohol-related harm that comes from inappropriate or excessive consumption of alcohol. And when Parliament passed the Act, they specifically said that the aim was a balanced approach that would target that type of harm from inappropriate or excessive consumption without unfairly prejudicing responsible consumers and responsible retailers of alcohol. And because your policy will, of course, be a central part of that system of control, it also needs to be reasonable. It would be unreasonable to target that 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. time for those customers who enjoy or need to shop at that time of the morning from a supermarket or grocery store. It would be unreasonable to target that unless there was some good reason to do so, some evidence that purchases at that time of the morning are leading to excessive or inappropriate consumption causing harm. And as I said, the Foodstuffs operators in Napier have not seen any evidence of that, and indeed I couldn't see any evidence of it in the materials that Council has prepared to support the LA. The same is the case at the other end of the day, at 9 p.m. hour. Again, there's no evidence that sales after 9 p.m. but before 10 p.m. lead to any greater risk. Most of Foodstuffs stores shut at about 9 or shortly after anyway, although there's one supermarket that goes till 10. And the material that Council put together to support the lab talks about risky drinkers doing most of their purchasing after 10 p.m, not before 10 p.m. So again, no reason to prohibit people effectively doing a full shop at their supermarket or grocery store after 9 o'clock but before 10. The Auckland Council legal process you're probably all familiar with. It was a situation where Auckland Council sought to bring in a 9 a.m. maximum hour in the morning, and that was held by the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority to be unreasonable because there was no evidence to support that. And the same situation would apply in Napier. The other thing that's important to remember, which no doubt you're already well familiar with, is that, of course, maximum trading hours in a local alcohol policy are only maximum. They don't mean that any particular applicant for an off-licence would obtain those hours in their licence. They simply would allow the District Licensing Committee the flexibility to tailor licence hours to meet the particular attributes and characteristics of the applicant and where the applicant is, the type of store they are, the type of customers they have, etc. So it's not a situation where leaving the maximum hours the way they are in your current LAP necessarily means that every supermarket or grocery store would get those hours from the District Licensing Committee. They will still, when they make their applications for renewals or for new licences, if there are to be new stores, they will still need to satisfy the committee that their hours will be appropriate given where they are, who their customers are, their systems, their staff training, and so on. That flexibility is valuable in any economy. It allows you to tailor the approach and the rules to meet the requirements of your community and to take account of and reflect what responsible customers and consumers of alcohol do in terms of how they purchase and how they consume and what they would like. The Supreme Court in the Auckland proceedings confirmed that customer convenience is to be considered. It is a matter that goes to reasonableness or unreasonableness. The next of the issues is in relation to discretionary conditions. And it's back to this theme of reasonableness. The current proposed changes to your local alcohol policy reproduce some guidance for District Licensing Committee as to what might be a reasonable condition. As you know, a committee can impose under the Act, when renewing or granting a licence, any discretionary condition, provided it's not inconsistent with the Act and provided that condition would be reasonable, which is back to the Parliament's theme that the whole system of control is required to be reasonable. You're proposing some guidance for committees about what's meant by reasonable. And at the moment, the proposal is to say to the committee that it should have regard, when deciding whether something's reasonable, to whether it would be within the capabilities of the licensee to satisfy the condition. With respect, that's not the test for reasonableness. That would be a test for whether something was possible. And that's not the correct legal test. The High Court has considered what's a reasonable condition in a couple of cases and has said that what's reasonable in alcohol law requires a proportionality assessment. You have to assess what a condition might achieve in terms of minimising alcohol-related harm coming from excessive or inappropriate consumption. You have to compare that on the one hand with the sacrifices, costs or burdens that you're putting on responsible consumers and retailers on the other. And a condition, if it's disproportionate, is unreasonable. So a condition that might gain very little is always unreasonable. Better guidance should be provided in the local alcohol policy to assist not only the District Licensing Committee, but also applicants and, importantly, community objectives who may not go back and read the Act, they may only read your policy, and they ought therefore to be reading what the courts have said is the correct test. You're also proposing in the list of discretionary conditions for off-licences, the list of discretionary conditions that the committee can consider, a condition which would prevent the sale of single units of mainstream beer less than 500 millilitres. Foodstuffs considers that such a condition for supermarkets and grocery stores is likely to be disproportionate, unreasonable, and potentially counterproductive. What the operators of the stores see is that many customers wish to take advantage of options to manage their alcohol spending and their alcohol consumption. There are customers who will choose to buy one can of beer deliberately because they wish to have a beer with a meal or with a game on TV, and they want to make sure that if they only have one in the house, that's all they can drink. If you take away that option, some of those customers will simply then have to buy a 4-pack or a 6-pack or a dozen, and they may then drink all 4, 6 or 12 at a single sitting. No gain has been made by taking away that option from those customers. Also, there's the risk that for some customers where budget is an important consideration and in fact a critical barrier to them, if you push them by forcing them to buy more than one can, if you push them to a price point they can't afford, there is the risk of a greater degree of crime, people stealing either the alcohol from the store or stealing in order to pay for it. And again, nothing's gained from that. The short point is there's nothing intrinsically more risky about a single can than there is about a 6-pack or a dozen. Clearly there's less alcohol in a single can. Foodstuff stores watch their customers, they get to know their customers well, and they look for those concerning behaviours around purchasing patterns that I talked about before. And if there are customers who are repeatedly buying a single can without any other groceries and in a way that gives the staff cause to be concerned, the stores can take action about that. They can reject sales, and they do at times, and they also, of course, can get in touch with the police or the licensing inspector about what to do. Just a couple of other quick points about your list of proposed discretionary conditions. There's one in relation to incidents registers. So this is a register where stores keep a record of alcohol-related incidents that occur in the store. Primarily what those are in foodstuff stores is just declined sales. Declining the sale because the person looked under 25 and did not have ID, or declining a sale because there was a group of people shopping together and not all of them had ID to show they were all over 18. Foodstuffs won't sell to any member of that group in that situation. Those sort of declined sales are what's largely in these incidents registers. And the foodstuff stores are happy to keep on keeping those. They've been doing it for a while, happy to do that. The submission, though, is as to the extent of what's proposed by way of discretionary condition. It talks about a condition requiring an obligation to supply that incident register in relation to an application for renewal of a licence. And with respect, the courts have determined that that would be beyond the power of council to have such a policy. You can have a policy that a licensee should keep an incidents register, but you can't have a policy as to what should be provided to the district licensing committee when it considers an application. That's a matter for the licensing committee, not for council's policy. And that's the same principle as relates to the proposal to have a discretionary condition around impact assessments. It's not clear to Foodstuffs quite what's meant by that, but any requirement to have an impact assessment and for such an impact assessment to be provided to the committee would be ultra vires, so outside of the council's power. That matter's already been determined by the courts. The Auckland Council proposed what they called local impacts reports, and that was appealed, and ultimately the High Court determined that a council simply can't have a policy on such matters. That's already covered by the Act. It's a matter for the Parliament to set rather than for the council. So those are foodstuff submissions. As I said, thank you very much for the opportunity to make submissions, and of course, if there are any questions, I've got plenty of time.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for your comprehensive submission on behalf of Foodstuffs. It was great to get some further clarity from you today around your written submission. So I will just open up to councillors for any questions. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr Thane, for this. Now, I don't know how long you've been with Foodstuffs, but in 2016, our draft LAP, which had similar restrictions placed in it, didn't go through simply because Foodstuffs, Woolworths and Superliquor threatened to appeal our LAP hours and take us to court. And this happened all over New Zealand and thwarted lots of councils from agreeing to their LAPs, getting them through. And that our LAP took until 2019. So we're going back more or less to the same restrictions that we asked for in 2016. And this time, because the law has been changed, you will not be able to challenge it in the same way that you were able to in 2016. And I just wanted to ask a question from something you said in your submission. As you have pointed out, it's not legal to sell alcohol to people who are intoxicated. And you say that earlier closures may see staff threatened by customers who may be angered by not being allowed to buy alcohol after 9 p.m. Now, that sounds to me like intoxicated people. So how do supermarkets actually train staff to identify intoxicated people? What do intoxicated people look like if that doesn't count as an intoxicated person?
Well, there are three aspects to what you've raised with me, thank you. The first in relation to the appeal rights, as you say, the appeals were lodged because Foodstuffs and other parties considered that elements that were proposed in provisional local alcohol policies were unreasonable in light of the object of the Act. And in a number of cases, the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority upheld that view, including against the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. hours that Auckland Council proposed. So that obligation on requirement for reasonableness continues, even though there's no appeal right, of course, now. In terms of what the stores find with those people who are who might become unhappy and perhaps angry and perhaps aggressive about sales not going through at the cut-off time, it's not because those people are intoxicated, it's because they might have started their shopping before the store's cut-off time. They may have even got to the checkout and with a big basket of goods, but then being delayed by perhaps the person ahead of them with a big basket of goods, or going slow across the checkout, or maybe is querying some issue or decides to go and buy a different product, so that by the time that customer gets to put their shopping across the checkout, the cut-off time has passed. They are then politely told that they will have to take the alcohol, they have to leave the alcohol there, they can't purchase it. That can upset some customers who in their lives may have all sorts of issues going on, and that shopping trip might have already been one that was quite stressful, perhaps. It's not because they are intoxicated. If they were intoxicated, the staff will have to deal with that, and they do have to deal with declining people who are intoxicated from purchasing every now and again. So the real concern is just that customers are angry about the system because they don't see it as their fault. They were there in time, they tried to get across the checkout, they consider they've been held up by somebody else, and they then say, come on, just sell me the bottle of wine, I was here. And they have to be declined, of course, and some customers will become aggressive in that situation. And in terms of, you asked, how does the Foodstuffs team identify whether a purchaser might be intoxicated? It's set out in the Act, of course, the ABCs: appearance, behaviour, coordination and speech. And every checkout operator, every checkout supervisor in the store is trained on assessing those aspects of a customer in order to determine whether or not that customer might be impaired by alcohol, might be intoxicated. And as I said before, although the Act only prohibits sales to people who are actually intoxicated, the stores in practice take a conservative line on that. If a person smells as though they have had any alcohol to drink, they'll be declined. The staff don't push the edges of the envelope with this. They err on the side of caution.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, kia ora. Through the Mayor, and thank you for your very full submission. There was a lot of points to cover in there. I'm interested in, and I particularly liked your kōrero around the reasonable, unreasonable conversation, and given that that is in light of the objective of the Act, which is to promote the safe, responsible sale and supply and consumption of alcohol and to minimise alcohol-related harm. So you spoke mainly around, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but around the burdens and the inconvenience placed on responsible customers and those not suffering from alcohol-related harm. What do you think is reasonable or unreasonable, to flip it that way, around the responsibilities of supermarkets to provide a place for people who are suffering from the challenges of addiction and alcohol-related harm, for them to have the right to go shopping and get their groceries without, I suppose, being subject to alcohol availability and alcohol advertising?
This is a matter that is an important one, and it's one that Parliament picked up, of course, in the Act. Before the current Act, stores could have their alcohol displays anywhere. They could have it right at the entrance, they could have alcohol displayed at the checkout, and then they could have it all around the store, dotted about. And indeed, some stores did used to do that. That's been banned, of course, and so now a supermarket or a grocery store must have all their alcohol, the product, any displays, any promotions, any advertising, all in just one area, just the single alcohol area in the store. And where that single alcohol area is, the store cannot have anything that isn't alcohol, so they can no longer cross-merchandise, as once upon a time was done. You can't sell a bar of chocolate on a neck tag around a bottle of wine. You can't even put bottle openers beside bottles in the single alcohol area. So there's no cross-merchandising. The alcohol has to be all in its own area and nothing else in there. And the stores can't themselves decide where that area is. The Parliament says it cannot be at the entrance and it cannot be at the checkout, the two places in every store where every customer must go. And what Parliament said is that it's the District Licensing Committee that must approve any single alcohol area, and they are not obliged, the committee is not obliged to simply accept what the store proposes. The committee has to look at it and decide, and the committee, when deciding, must have regard to the purpose the Parliament stated, which is the purpose being to limit, so far as reasonably practicable, the exposure of shoppers to the alcohol in the store. So that's the balance that Parliament has struck. It's looked at exactly the concern you've raised, and it's said, well, we're going to allow supermarkets and grocery stores to have alcohol, but we're going to limit the exposure of shoppers. We're going to allow them to go in and out of a store without having to go through the alcohol area. And we're going to give the power in the conversation to the committee.
Supplementary. So I noticed that you have quiet shopping hours for people who are sensitive to noise. So that's quite a fabulous way that you cater for a section of our population that is suffering from sensitivities that aren't widely shared. Just wondering, do you think it would be unreasonable for a supermarket to have alcohol-free times for people who are suffering from the harms of addiction to go shopping and get their food?
I think that, firstly, I'm not familiar with which of the stores has the quiet times. I know that all of the stores, by their total range of hours, effectively provide something of that for customers, because as I said before, that 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. morning hour is a quiet time in most of the stores, and those shoppers who value a quiet time in the store have that option. And later in the evening, in some of the stores, is also a relatively quiet time, and again, that's provided. And in a place like Napier, which is obviously a tourist attraction, a tourist hub, both local New Zealand tourists, but also many overseas tourists come to Hawke's Bay, of course. The ability to provide that range of hours for shoppers is quite a valuable one. You can't physically make a store bigger when the demand is higher around summer and so on, or around things like Art Deco weekend, but you can make a store bigger by having wider hours to allow the customers to spread themselves out. So that's sort of that. And then in terms of your point about would it be reasonable? Well, it's not really, I guess, for me to say that, because that will come down to how customers feel about that. On the one hand, there would be some customers who might value that experience, but on the other hand, there'd be some customers who would find that inconvenient for them, because their available time to shop for the family shop might be quite limited because of other things that they have in their lives: work, childcare, community obligations, and so on. And it's a hard thing to say to one group of people, you win, while another lose. And the Parliament, as I said before, what the Parliament did with this was to try to balance this by putting those alcohol areas into one place, so that shoppers who don't wish to go into that alcohol area can choose not to do so.
Yeah, thank you.
It's very conscious of
Bond.
time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We will move on because I'm very conscious of time. But Ian, thank you once again for your submission and for providing the additional context in your verbal submission today. Much appreciated.
Kia ora.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay, and our next submitter is also online. We have Jennifer Lamb from Alcohol Health Watch.
Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Ready for us to start?
Yes, absolutely. Welcome.
Kia ora, councillors, and you'll probably be able to figure that I'm not Jennifer Lamb. Ko Andrew Galloway Toku Ingoara, I'm the Executive Director of Alcohol Health Watch, and I'm pleased to be joined by Jennifer Lamb from my team. Alcohol Health Watch is a national organisation providing credible, up-to-date evidence and advice regarding alcohol policy and planning matters. We coordinate networks such as the Cross-Council Local Alcohol Policy Network and other networks and projects that support the sector and communities planning for alcohol harm. We want to commend your council on undertaking a review of the joint 2019 local alcohol policy, and we thank you for giving us this opportunity to present to you today. Our written submission outlined the many reasons a local alcohol policy is a key measure in a package of interventions and policies aimed at minimising alcohol-related harm to individuals, whānau and the community. Other measures include alcohol bans, the Council's function as a licensing authority, the joint alcohol strategy and community safety projects and initiatives. Alcohol places a significant burden on the community, on your city and in fact the whole region and nationally. The latest estimate, 2024, was $9.1 billion annually, and we know that what evidence there is likely an underestimate of the total burden of disease, and particularly that which affects vulnerable groups and those at greatest risk, young people, Māori, and those in high socio-economic deprivation areas. Noting that alcohol is the most harmful drug in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we know that the local alcohol policy can reduce this harm by reducing density and location of outlets, setting maximum trading hours that address accessibility, sale and consumption of alcohol. A revised local alcohol policy can and should reflect the current environment and emerging issues in your city since 2019, and the desirability of ensuring greater consistency and synergy with local alcohol policies in the wider Hawke's Bay Gohi, particularly with Hastings District Council and across Aotearoa, New Zealand. It should also adopt the precautionary approach, which was hard won in the Supreme Court in the cases that Mr. Thane mentioned. At the Supreme Court level, which is the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court really did enshrine local government's ability to take the precautionary principle, which means testing whether those measures, including discretionary conditions, can in fact reduce alcohol harm, and it's important. The preferences of the community was also critical and a key area that the Supreme Court chose to hone in on when it enshrined and empowered Auckland Council to take the final step with its hard-fought, almost 10-year battle to get a local alcohol policy. We're therefore really pleased to see that the draft LAP continues the policy preventing the issue of new off-licences for bottle stores in an identified area in Maranui, a deprivation decile 10 suburb. However, we would recommend consideration of extending that to other areas that experience high levels of deprivation, such as Marua and Onikawa, and the policy could also include other off-licences in addition to bottle stores. We are very supportive of the off-licence trading hours of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. as this reflects community concerns and it is supported by research. It would help reduce the opportunity of hazardous drinking and preloading, sideloading, post-loading and the incidence of alcohol-related harm. These hours reflect the trend in LAPs across Aotearoa, New Zealand. We also support the reduction in closing times for some on-licences such as taverns, bars, pubs and nightclubs, but we recommend a reduction in closing times for all on-licences and club licences. In this regard, we note that Hastings District Council has now reduced the closing time for on-licences in Class 2 and 3 clubs by 1 hour. We are pleased to see that the one-way door restriction has been retained and will be applied from 1 a.m. rather than 2 a.m. These policies have the potential to reduce the burden on police, ambulance and hospital services and can have a positive benefit for not only for patrons of premises but the wider community. In addition, we would like to see other policies that address the location of licensed premises as provided for in Section 77(1)(a), (b) and (c) of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. Such policies could restrict licensed premises to a broad area such as a specified zone or ensure that new licensed premises are not in close proximity or clustered with other premises or near sensitive sites such as education facilities, places of worship, marae, treatment centres or other health facilities. We strongly support the inclusion of additional discretionary conditions, including those that address single sales, external alcohol product signage and advertising, the management of premises and alignment with crime prevention through environmental design principles, and the requirement for an impact assessment we also recommend. We recommend additional discretionary conditions could be included on buy now, pay later schemes as inappropriate for the purchase of alcohol. ID checks on the purchase and delivery of alcohol, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, warning signage at off licences, restricting end-of-aisle sales of alcohol products and not allowing special licences for family-focused events. Alcohol-related harm increases where alcohol is easily accessible, where there is a high concentration of alcohol outlets and in a particular area, that is in high areas of deprivation, where trading hours are long, where businesses are conducted in such a way that impulsive alcohol purchases are encouraged, such as buy now, pay later, online, remote delivery, sales and rapid delivery, and where the price is affordable. We are, in conclusion, fully supportive of the strengthened provisions in your draft LAP that address affordability and access, particularly the reduction in trading hours and discretionary conditions. We support the continuation of the policy preventing the issue of new off-licences for bottle stores in an area of high deprivation, with the hope that this might be extended to other high deprivation areas in Napier. These measures align very strongly with the object of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, which is the minimisation of alcohol harm. We are confident these would reduce the burden of alcohol, its harm and costs on Napier City. Thank you for the opportunity to present. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll open up to councillors for any questions. Councillor Bogue.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. You said that the one-way door restriction reduces the burden on police and ambulances, etc. Could you explain that, please?
Certainly. So where one-way doors have been imposed, and they've been imposed under the old Sale of Liquor Act 1989 and more recently under this Act, by not having people moving between premises, you reduce that flashpoint that can occur in the late night economy between people who have already consumed alcohol, may have lessened inhibitions or become a victim or perpetrator of crime having consumed too much alcohol. And ultimately, it reduces down that flashpoint opportunity. Jennifer, did you have anything to add?
Also stops everybody coming out at the same time.
Correct, yes. The flow of people out into the street at a closing time can increase the opportunity for incidents of violent crime.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Thank you both for your time, both for the written submission and your time to present to us today. Much appreciated.
Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we have another online. Is this also via Zoom? Yeah. No. Okay. Dr. Matt Radford from Health New Zealand. Welcome. Good to have you here today.
Kia ora koutou, ko Matt Radford tuku ingoa. I'm a medical officer health here in Hawke's Bay and come presenting on behalf of Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora, and part of director of that is the National Public Health Service and represent Hawke's Bay here. Personally, I come from a decades of experience as a doctor working in an emergency department, as a junior doctor and seeing the harms of alcohol firsthand, and also as a general practitioner. And now as a public health doctor looking at the broader population implications. I'd like to acknowledge input from other people within Hawke's Bay's public health unit and also the central region as well, helping put this together. This is on behalf, as I said, on Te Whatu Ora, and we have statutory obligations under Pai Ora Act 2022 and the Health Act 1956 to improve, promote and protect the health of people and communities. And the submission aligns with Health New Zealand's commitment to healthy communities through reducing inequities and promoting good health. So let's start off by just talking some points I think it's really important to consider when thinking about the LAP, and then broader talking about a few key points we'd like to raise up. Obviously, we've got the written submission, which has lots of detail in it, but I'll just highlight some of our key points we'd like to raise. So to start off, alcohol is no ordinary commodity. It's not bread, it's not milk. It's an addictive product and causes a large amount of harm. As we said before, $9.1 billion a year to New Zealand, and it's New Zealand's most harmful drug as well. Hence, it has to have regulations in place to treat it in such that way as well. It's important to mind that there's been strong community support for reducing the harm from alcohol in the Hawke's Bay. In 2016, a survey was done of the local community. This included 400 people in Napier. 57% of the community believed that alcohol had negative or very negative impacts on the community. This is in contrast to only 2% who thought it had a very positive effect. More recently, a 2023 Napier Community Social Survey showed 19% of respondents felt unsafe in the community because of alcohol and other drugs as well. Often here today, we've talked a lot about the acute harms, but it's really important to keep thinking about the long-term harms of alcohol as well. There's no safe level of alcohol. There's guidelines to reduce that risk, but we know that increases a large number of different types of cancers, strokes, even we're talking about mental health and suicide as well. And unfortunately, it's estimated about 600 children born each year with fetal alcohol spectrum as well. Now, alcohol harm is not just related to people that are dependent on alcohol, have addiction. From looking at the data, about 3/4 of the harm comes from people that aren't dependent on alcohol as well. Whilst there's people in the community that are affected more, particularly Māori, those living in hyperdeprivation and men, the harms go across the whole community as well. You're looking at, for example, at ED admission rates nationally as well. The burden is similar for injuries across the whole age group because you've got younger people hurting themselves, but also older people as well injuring themselves as well. Even for those 1 in 4 people that choose not to drink, they also are affected as well. 1 in 3 crimes and 1 in 4 traffic incidents are related to alcohol as well. Hence, really pointing out that alcohol is not related to a specific subgroup, it affects us all, and hence it's important to have a population-wide approach as well. Now coming on to talk about specific matters in the LAP, and we're starting off to talk about the location. So Health New Zealand recommends that Council considers expanding the current provisions to restricting further off licences to all of Napier, also known as a sinking lid approach as well. Whilst, as I pointed to, basically the point of that is that alcohol is widespread, the harm that it causes as well. By having specific areas, that's going to be insufficient to reduce that harm as well. You know, Napier is geographically a small area as well, so no area, maybe Bayview is within 5 minutes of IF licence as well. Why IF licence is particular, we know that 3/4 of alcohol consumption by hazardous drinkers comes from off licences as well. And it's also the community impression of where the most harm comes from that community survey that I mentioned prior. There is really a high number of off licences in Hawke's Bay. We've got 62 off licences as well. You just have to drive down Carlisle Street. You see 6 retailers within 600 metres of each other, the bottle stores in Carlisle Street, and then down to Station Street, the 3 supermarkets as well. It's important to think about what other services and how do they compare to Hawke's Bay as well. For example, there's only 16 pharmacies in Hawke's Bay, so there's 4 times the amount of off licences. Some of those off licences do accrue remote sailors, but it's still about 30 physical presence you can go into as well. And also from the community survey, 56% of people wanted fewer bottle stores as well. And we know from the evidence that the density affects purchases as well. The more retailers there are, the more accessible it is, the more closer together, the more competition that drives prices down and increase alcohol consumption up. Point 2, talking about maximum trading hours. So Health New Zealand supports the LAP's reduction in opening hours for taverns, bars, nightclubs, etc. from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. the next day as well. Particularly has been mentioned multiple times as well, we say that greatest harm is in the evening and also in the early mornings as well. Whilst you see, looking at those police numbers reduce less in sort of 2 or 3 a.m. compared to 12 o'clock, you've got to think about the proportion of people that are out in the community at that time. There's probably only, like, in terms of, I don't have specific evidence to look at that, but you've got to think about there's probably a lot more people, small people out there at that time of night as well. So the percent of people that are related to alcohol harm may be high, but as well to consider. And we've seen from previous New Zealand events that reducing trading hours reduces that harm as well. Previously, prior to 2013, there was no restrictions on the hours. We've seen reducing the harms now that there is restrictions in hours as well. Again, community support, 45% want shorter opening hours for on licences as well. It's also important to think about Hawke's Bay and other contents. We talk about tourist towns as well. So Tauranga confirmed the LAP is 2 a.m. as well, and also talking about Hastings was 1 a.m. So it's in keeping with other cities of similar types of nature that also, like Tauranga, have tourism as well and on the beach. Health New Zealand also supports the reduction off licences from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. as well, and even consider going further to an 8 p.m. closing as well for the council to consider. And talking about overall reductions in overall hours as well, we know that there's strong evidence that reducing the total numbers of hours reduces the harm that comes from it, again pointing to the introduction of restriction hours in 2013, saw a decline in physical assaults and ED admissions as well. And looking at international study, even we know an hour difference can make a change as well. Norway has seen for every hour that's reduced was a 16% reduction in violent crime. And community support, short hours as well, 51% from that community survey and 54% for bottle stores as well. It's also important to think about other retailers in this context as well. 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We talk about sort of shift work, but there's still 12 hours out of a day where people go to sleep, might be out for 16 hours a day. It's still a large portion of the day. Think about other retailers. Pharmacies are typically open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we're not going to even mention about how often banks are open as well. Or little they're open. So, it's not any different from other people having to fit these things in. And alcohol, I said, is a different commodity to many other things as well, so it'd be restricted more. It's important we align supermarkets and bottle stores. New Zealand evidence shows that there's no difference in the harms that's caused by the two retailers, so they should be treated as such. Talking specifically to the 9 p.m. or as suggested 8 p.m. closing as well, again, we saw the most harm was happening in the evening as well. The 9 p.m. closing is very common across other LAPs in the country, and the Supreme Court ruling in Auckland also said that 9 p.m. closing was justified. Now, talking specifically to the 9 a.m. opening time as well, there's no specific evidence around that specific time in the morning as well. We know overall reducing down the hours reduces the harm as well. As been brought up before, we've got to think about the 1 in 4 people in Hawke's Bay that drink in a hazardous manner as well. Thinking about how can we going to support them. Mentioned about alcohol being in specific areas, but it's still very visible to many locations. If you're doing, for example, a full shop, as discussed, you will see the alcohol very, very prominently. It's not away in any area. People will see it, and that strong addiction that helps to alcohol as well. It makes it hard for them as well. Or thinking about a newly pregnant mama who wants to give up alcohol as well. It makes it challenging for them as well. And again, as been talked about, it's not unfamiliar with supermarkets. They, for Easter trading, they restrict off the alcohol area, or also they have certain hours, as we talked about, for people with neurodivergent. It also reduces exposure that children might be away onto the supermarket. It reduces exposure to alcohol as well. We know reduced exposure to alcohol for children also reduces alcohol-related harm later on in life. And it's also in keeping with other LAPs in the area as well. CHB is 9 a.m. and Wairau is even later at 10 a.m. as well. So it's in keeping with the General Trend in Hawke's Bay. Coming on to discretionary conditions, there's obviously many in there, and we support the range of discretionary conditions in there. It's good to have them. It just gives that flexibility, because within each category on, off license, special license, there's a range of risks as well. So it just helps tailor and be more flexible and well. And whilst they're discretionary, listing them really helps normalise them and also helps applicants, because they can see the list of criteria as well. So then when they're working for an application, they can see ideas and work within the licence to see what works. In terms of specific discretionary conditions, got highlighted sort of 3 key ones. One would be around advertisement. We know that advertisement really increases people's, particularly for youth, early initiation and heavy drinking as well. One type of restriction can be around the size of frontage on bottle stores, for example, some limiting to less than 25% as well. Central Hawke's Bay has one around no external, the sandwich board sides outside retailers as well. In terms of special licenses, really, and this has been a strong focus of particularly the former DHB as well, was prohibiting licenses for events focused on children and young people under 18 to limit the exposure to alcohol. Children and alcohol don't mix. Often commonly associated, people talk about the European approach of socialising alcohol normal when they're young, but evidence shows that this actually leads to more children to start drinking younger and more hazardously as well. And as mentioned, it is in the Wairau LAP as well, so it is not new. And then in terms of the third condition, around the requirement of alcohol-free events as well, Georgia talked to this point about great as well. It's really important that people, not just young people, but other people that don't drink, the 1 in 4 people that don't drink, can go along to events, and they don't have to want to go in a safe alcohol-free space as well. That community survey pointed that 3 in 4 people wanted more community-associated events that were less alcohol-focused as well. And anecdotally, an alcohol-free area at the recent Stan Walker concert in Taupo was well received. And it's important that alcohol-free area is a like for like. It's not like a second-rate type of thing. It's a similar experience as well. Finally, it's really important that the Napier and Hastings LAP align due to their close nature, particularly around those timings. It lines up as well. I noted a mistake on our part about, it wasn't our submission, but would really support even having that Napier and Hastings closing time at 1 a.m. It also makes having alignment makes it easy for the public when you have to think about different places and different things. People, the more things and barriers you put in, the less people are likely to get confused about it. Also makes it easier for applicants that may have different stores in different places as well. It also really demonstrates the public the ability of the councils to work together for a good solution. Once again, we'd like to reiterate Health New Zealand's support for the LAP as well, and however, we'll just encourage 3 further changes to consider. One is around a Napier-wide restriction on issues of off licences. 2, a further reduction off licences, trading hours from 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. closing, and the introduction of additional discretionary conditions that's around child-free events, advertisement restrictions, and alcohol-free areas at events as well. So thanks to the committee, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. I'll open up for any questions. Councillor McGrath.
Just through you, Madam Mayor. Comment you made with regards to bottle stores and supermarkets with regard to harm. Is there no evidence to show one's better or worse than the other when it comes to harm? What was the comment?
The same, in terms of New Zealand studies that was done looking at the harm there in terms of equal, in terms of hazardous drinking from both. So it's encouraging them to treat them as such.
Councillor Bowe.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Are there other localities in New Zealand that have a sinking lid policy in terms of licensed premises or bottle stores?
I can't think off the top of my head, but I think there is. There is off the top of my head, but in specific parts of town. But I can't think of a nation citywide. But there probably most likely is, but I don't even support that.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Just a quick, yeah.
Councillor Price.
Do you have any stats on alcohol harm with crime relating to parties and not hotels? Bars? You know, like what I'm saying is we've got to find the balance to reduce harm, but it's come out quite clearly here that it's some parents would sooner have their children in a bar supervised than going to a party. And then at what hour does it shut off for people not to go to a party? Do you have any experience in that sort of situation?
So I'll answer that. Secondly, just having a thought, Wairau has a sinking lid on off licences.
Thanks.
So coming back to the question, so I guess there was a discussion about, particularly for on licence, about you might just shift the harm earlier, but evidence shows that you actually reduce the harm. It's not shifting it early or anything like that. It overall reduces the harm from reducing those hours in on licences. I think you specifically asked about parties. I guess that's hard to measure. For example, we've got ED data about people that present with alcohol-related problems, but we don't specifically ask them where were you drinking or where that harm come from. I guess that's important why it's an and. So it's thinking about on licenses and off licenses as well. By reducing that those hours on off license, you can reduce that harm from parties and events, and then also restricting the hours on license, you can repart it at both ends. So it's a and. There's synergistic effects.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to have an answer, wouldn't it, really? But I can see where you're coming from.
There's no further questions. Thank you very much for your submission and your time today. Now, we are at 2 hours, which would normally mean understanding orders. We need to have a break. However, I'm conscious we've got submitters who have been waiting patiently, and I would rather just push through and get us through to the lunch break unless there's any strong objections to that. So that being the case, I would invite Georgie Robertson, and I see we've got Peter Holly in attendance as well, and for the next winery concert holding submission. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. I'm Georgie Robertson, and I help the Mission get their licences almost every year for the special licences we do for the Mission concerts. With me today is Peter Holly, who's the CEO of Mission, and he'll be here to answer any questions. Mission has been hosting concerts at the Vineyard for well over 3 decades, a long time. These events host up to 25,000 people, of which about 70% come from out of town. The success of these concerts is based on the quality experience of people attending. That experience is based on factors that are over and above the conditions on a licence. It's based on the entire event. It's security, it's safety, it's convenience, it's hospitality, it's the mood of the crowd, and of course it's the actual performance themselves. Most recently we had the Robbie Williams concert. That was over an entire weekend. That was 50,000 people attended Mission. So if we look at that, that's 35,000 people that came from out of town, that's staying in rented accommodation, it's staying in our hotels. They're out there, they're enjoying our hospitality, they're spending money in the shops, they're going to galleries. And they left having a really good time. Mission concerts target the age bracket of 35 to 70 years of age. They are not and never have been aimed at the under 25s. Children are welcome at Mission, but we don't often see them. It's really rare. We support lots of local groups and charities. Rotary have been at every concert, I think, since the inception. Napier Boys High School and St John's College come and they do a sterling job of cleaning up after the event every year, and they're well paid for it. There are about 300 bar staff employed for the concert, and that doesn't include all our other casual event staff as well. We always have at least one local performer on the bill, and as far as possible, all other contractors are locally sourced. So that's our fencing supplies, that's our portaloos, security as far as we can. So these large events are really important for our community, and Mission Concerts have been doing it really well. We're concerned about some of the discretionary conditions that are being proposed in the LAP, particularly the prohibition on the sale of bottles of wine. Now, most people, when they go to a winery, they're going to expect to be able to purchase a bottle of wine at an event, and we've been doing it really well for a long time. It's sold responsibly. We've got ID checks before you get in the line to go up to the bar, and then a server may ask you again. If they're not sure, they've got the right to ask, and they do. It's the same with intoxication assessments as well. The patrons at Mission aren't heavily intoxicated. They're not. They're happy. They're having a good time, and they might do a bit of a dance. And there's always going to be one or two that cause issues, and it happens, but it's likely to be less than 0.1%. I think the last concerts we had, there was 1 or 2 arrests made. No charges were laid, ultimately, though. And out of 25,000 people, I think that's really good. It shows a well-run event. The list of discretionary conditions for special licenses is enormous, and our concerns are, what are they going to be based on? What guidelines is being given to the licensing inspector and to the DLC about when these are imposed? So when we're talking about restrictions on the types of drinks that are available, the alcohol by volume, the ABV, or the types of containers, most of the time we'll have cans, we'll have plastic cups, and we'll have bottles of wine. And obviously we're giving, with our bottles of wine, we're giving plastic cups as well. The plastics are really hard to recycle. That's a bit of an issue for us. And if we were not able to sell bottles of wine, we would be selling far more plastic than we do currently. In one of the Class 1 event special licence discretionary conditions, you've got security staff, portaloos and rubbish bins to be provided in surrounding areas. So what you're requiring a licensee to do in that instance is actually put portaloos and rubbish bins in an area they can't control. It's not owned by them. We don't have any tenure to them. We don't have any right to them. We actually don't have any right to put a portaloo on Church Road. We don't have that ability. And I think the condition that you're wanting with that, the idea is great, but we actually can't follow through with it. It's also not to do with alcohol licensing, which is also a bit concerning. Serve reductions in place to manage intoxication, that happens now anyway. And in large events, there's always a meeting with the licensee, with a representative. There's the police, public health are there, not public health, the Servo AMBOs are there, and security. And they talk about what's going on at the event, and they talk about if intoxication looks like it's starting to rise, and whether or not serves need to be reduced. And on the whole, it is reduced, and it's reduced at a later time in the evening before the bars close. And with most events, going on what Georgia was saying before, most events stop selling alcohol before the main event, probably shortly after the main event starts. They do stop because they're there now for that event, and they're there to watch, and they don't want to go standing in queues at the bar. It's actually, yeah, that's kind of Anything else I need to add? No? Okay. Have we got any questions for Mission?
Councillor Price.
Your company, Hospitality Licensing Limited.
Yes.
What experience do you have in liquor?
I started pushing plates when I was 14. I'm now 54. I started my own practice in 2001. I've been doing alcohol licensing since 30 years ago. I write for Thomson Reuters in their practice and procedures for Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. I represent about 900 licensed, it's over 900 licensed venues around the country. There are just over 12,000 in total, so that's about 8%. And all I do is prepare and file applications. I understand how LAPs work and how discretionary conditions will then follow on onto a licence, and how sometimes the best intentions of conditions are really hard to actually enforce, and how they can be unenforceable for a licensing inspector. And I can talk more about that when it's my submission, which is next. But that's my experience.
Okay, just a question from that. You've made mention that closing all venues at 2 a.m. is not going to stop drinking at that time, but it will force people to be unsupervised, unmonitored places like streets, places and homes.
Yep.
Can you just tell me how you come to that conclusion?
I was 18 once. That's probably the best thing I can do. That's actually my personal submission. This is not the submission that I made on behalf of Mission. So if I can just clarify, there's two that I've made.
Yeah.
I have a 16-year-old son. He's about to shortly going to be drinking in pubs, and Chris is not a client of mine, but I want him at the Thirsty Whale. I want him drinking in those environments because they are supervised, they are monitored, and Chris knows what he's doing when it comes to intoxication. You know, Jasper went to a party, shouldn't even say this, and was given some alcohol, and I talked to the mother of the party 2 weeks later and found out he was having a bit of a hurl, shall we say. And I don't want him doing that. I don't want him in that environment. I want him monitored.
Thank you.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Peter. Something that you said really tickled my brain around sort of the unenforceable things and around the discretionary points that we're considering. So obviously there is the Sale of Alcohol Act, there's the local alcohol policy.
Yep.
When you're putting on an event of the size of the Mission, and what are the other legal instruments or laws that you've got to have plans around or satisfy? Because I'm assuming some of the discretionary items we're considering may be covered by them.
You mean health and safety wise?
Yeah,
absolutely, there will be, but Peter could talk to that rather than I.
I mean, this is a very good question in the context of alcohol. Might be worthwhile backtracking just for 1 minute, just to say the scale and size of this event is like nowhere else in the world, literally. It's a greenfield site. 2 weeks later, it's got 25,000 people in it. Another 10 days later, it's back to normal. Now, that requires a huge amount of resource, time and commitment, but it also requires confidence from our community, both our patrons, but also our providers, suppliers, our volunteers, and then a whole raft of professional providers, and Georgie is one of those who prepares our licence application. So if you had a look at the H&S side of it, we could potentially have as many as 5 or 6 H&S programs in place, and then you'd have an overlapping PCBU responsibility with all of those various safety programs. So there's that type of complexity around it. So, for example, Live Nation might bring a performer in. They will have their own H&S. The performer will have their own H&S. We have a site H&S, and then we have a company H&S that overlaps then. Then in addition to that, we've got a safety program as well, and we've got a disaster recovery. And I've been trying very hard to get out of the chair of that because it actually lies with the landowner. So we work closely with the police. The emergency program is about 130 pages long, and it covers off things like active shooters, you know, all stuff that happens in communities that maybe shouldn't. So there is an enormous amount of effort and work that goes in behind this. And I think you need to review this not as a template, but in the context of every single event that we host, because some of them are very different. You know, Michael Bublé might be very different to the Doobie Brothers, which we did in, help me, Kirsten.
I think we're time ago.
Yeah, we did the Doobies in the late 90s, I think. But, you know, clearly the profile of that audience is quite different. So, as Georgie said earlier, we're not targeting young people. We're going for international quality acts. And sadly, at the moment, around alcohol and licensing, we've seen Juicy go down. We've seen Homegrown in Wellington. We've seen issues with our Gisborne event competition. And so we've got to look at that in the context of, do promoters want to bring people into a country where there's uncertainty around the regulatory framework? And fortunately, we've never been there. So I think, just to recap and to conclude, there is a massive amount of regulatory framework that we have to comply with. And it's not because we have to, it's because we want to. And I think that's also the spirit around the LAP and around our own special licensing applications. We've argued with the police to give us the right to actually close our own bars. And I think Sergeant Ray Wiley's behind me now. So, you know, and the whole deal there is, it's a joint decision. We've said, well, hang on, if we've got a brand here, and if we're not happy with the conduct of our audience, we would like to have that right to close it. So in that regard, we're very closely aligned. I think, you know, we really want to have a good event. We want people to come along, an affordable place where they can really, you can make up with your mother-in-law, and that happens so often. It's a good thing. But you can also get home safely, and I think that's the sort of alignment that we're looking for.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, a couple of questions. Probably the first one is in relation to the comment that selling wine in plastic bottles, you need to produce a certain amount and you may not sell it at the event. What proportion would you end up putting into a fire sale?
We've only ever done it once. And I think from memory there was about 30% of the total production that we were left with. And unfortunately, it is a fire sale. You do have to lower the price to move it, and that's not in the interest of the broader community. If you don't do that, the wine will perish because there's oxygen egress through plastic. So we don't want to do plastic. Plastic didn't really work that well at the event either. People, you know, in fact, I would say that probably the behaviour was slightly different than under glass. And if you come back to the argument around glass, other than the sustainability issues, the broader downstream waste, all of those sorts of things, you've got to look at the event in terms of its safety. We've only ever really looked to do that first pour, if we can, as a single bottle. And the reason for that is that we open the gates and you get 25,000 people that enter into that venue. And we can stagger it. We've done a lot of work over a long period of time to get those people in safely and to make sure they settle. That's the key thing, because people want to spot, they want to get down with their families, they want to open their hampers. This is one of the very rare events in the whole world just about where we encourage people to bring their own picnics, their own lunch boxes. So when people find their spot, they want to settle down, that first pour is actually quite important because it doesn't go to one person, it goes to a broader ecosystem, and then people settle down. I can cast our minds back to 2012 with the Sting event. We ended up on every single paper just around the world. Despite the fact that we laid in resource that we had never ever done before, we just couldn't keep up with our audience. There just wasn't enough capacity, and we've doubled it, quadrupled it since then to make sure that we can deliver against that consumer expectation. So, you know, the one bottle argument is really around an organisational prospect, and then it gets dialed back. So it's around getting people settled. That's the key thing, because otherwise that audience just churns. You get 25,000 people and it doesn't settle, and that's quite a sort of an anxious moment. And then if you throw a bit of rain into the paddock, which we've had on occasion, then that 25,000 people turn those pathways into something which you don't want. So it's around preserving the integrity of the event. It's around making sure people get in, they're comfortable. We've got a lot of people, as Geordie says, monitoring all of our bars. We're licensed general managers in every single retail point. We've got a very good relationship with the New Zealand Police and the ambulance. And then we meet regularly. In fact, Georgie meets with them hourly on the way through. And those decisions are made and they're actually complied with. So we've got communications with all our retail outlets. If there's a sense that there is an intoxication element that's not satisfactory, we close those bars, and we've done that before as well. Or you dial back on the pools. So it's one of those things that gets managed from the day we file the application. What is our audience profile we anticipate? What it's going to look like? How big do we think it's going to be? What is the resource we have to allocate? And then how do we manage that on the night? That's the key thing.
Extrapolating on that, that's when you have your alcohol management plan. So that's the thing. And so many of these discretionary conditions are probably better suited to be part of an alcohol management plan instead, because they fluctuate and because they're so different. And it's not you must have 17 security guards for every X amount of people. It's not a condition. This is what we want to have. We're going to aim for 17 security guards. It's probably 412, but, we're going to aim for that, but it's not actually a condition of the licence. But the licence is granted on what we say we're going to do. And if we don't do it, we get in trouble anyway. It doesn't need to be an actual condition.
My second question, just for clarification, although in the discretionary it says no glass wine bottles to be sold, the District Licensing Commission still has the right to allow for the sale of glass bottles. In your application, if you state that, the Licensing Commission can grant.
In my experience, there's not many DLC chairs that will go against a recommendation of the LAP. And that's my experience nationwide. It's in the LAP, that's what it says, that's what we have to do. And it's always, every application needs to be determined on its merits, right? This is where we are, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to run it. But it's very rare for a DLC to go beyond what's in the LAP.
Not too many mission concerts either.
There's not too many of those too. Yeah. We don't mind having an exception for us.
Any further questions? Just asked. Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks,
and
Peter.
Georgie, we've got you for your...
If you'd like to stay, you're welcome. You can still be my friend.
How long is it?
No, it's long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to the committee. Mayor Kirsten-Wise, thanks for the time and the opportunity. And,
so you've got my background. Oh, thanks, Dale. You've got my background now, so you know that I know licensing really well. I deal with conditions of licenses every day, and I understand what you guys have put together here and what you want to achieve with it, which ultimately every licensee wants to do the right thing. My biggest concern, though, is over-conditioning of licenses, and to quote a DLC chair, running a licence through the complicator, because that's what can happen and what does happen. With the on-licence conditions, you said a certain number of security guards at a particular time. Let's say 4 security guards on a Friday or Saturday night. So what happens if one's sick? And the guys, he's just got sick and had to leave, and then all of a sudden, so we ring the contractor, because a lot of the times you use security contractors to provide you with it. You ring and it's going to be half an hour, so he's half an hour away. We've got to close the bar. If you've got a condition on the licence, it says you've got to have 4 security guards on a Friday and Saturday night, and I'm going to have a gap of half an hour, I have to close the bar, because otherwise to sell alcohol during that time would be a breach of my licence condition. That's not what you guys are intending, but that's what would be a consequence. Similar with CCTV cameras. If I was meant to have 10 CCTV cameras, we've had a shortage, a power surge during the day. 2 of them are on the blink. I can't sell alcohol. I can't sell alcohol until those 2 cameras are fixed. And again, I don't think that's a consequence that you want. I think it's something that is probably best placed in a host responsibility policy, a social responsibility policy, or an implementation plan. A condition has to be based on something real, not could cause or might happen. It actually needs to be based on the likelihood of risk, and it has to be based on fact. And that's something that's been in countless decisions from the authority and from the High Court. So again, Ian Thane talked about reasonableness, and that conditions have to be reasonable and they've got to be applicable to the actual thing that you're licensing. And again, every application is on its merits. And so many of these discretionary conditions actually don't need to be part of the alcohol licence. They just need to be in the paperwork behind it, right? So this is my application. This is how I'm going to run my business, and the DLC will determine the application on that. And that's where you get all the procedural stuff in there. That's where you get the CCTV cameras, the security cameras. What I've seen, so Auckland's LAP was 10 years in the making, and probably most of their inspectors will agree it's 10 years out of date, and now it's in there. So many of the conditions that are in their LAP that are discretionary have become mandatory by default. So an incident register, right, you're required to have them in every single venue. You must have an incident register. So that's to register anything that's related to alcohol. So we've denied service, we've had a brawl out the front, whatever. You've got to have this register. BYO restaurants, Class 3 restaurants, that's a restaurant with no bar. They're required to have these, and it serves no purpose whatsoever. It's just another piece of paper that they've got to have next to their manager register that says this is how we run our business. It's not required for those premises. Napier on the whole, when they work through a licence application, the police, public health and the licensing inspector report on the application. The public have 5 weeks in which to lodge an objection should they choose to. And then most of the time we don't see many objections here. We're pretty happy with things generally. The inspector then will recommend some conditions, and it goes to the DLC, and then the DLC will generally impose the conditions that the inspector has recommended. What I haven't seen happen is discussions with the licensee or the applicant prior to those conditions being signed off. And some of the ones that are proposed here are extraordinary. And I would suggest that perhaps as part of the LAP, that the inspector sends proposed conditions to the licensee or to the applicant beforehand, so they can see what's going on the licence and they can have a discussion about whether or not some of these conditions are warranted. And it invites further conversation, and that's really ultimately what you want. On a personal level, for off licences, 9 o'clock close, I don't care, so long as it's even across the board. I don't think most off-licence holders will be that concerned about it. If they're going to close at 9 rather than 10, that's okay. They're not paying as much in wages, and people change their shopping habits. And so, I'll just say that. In terms of opening hours for groceries and supermarkets, I really want to keep it at 7 o'clock. I like shopping early morning because there's no one there. And it's a really good time to shop. For me, that's my preference. And I want to do the whole shop. I don't, to go back to buy my bottles of wine later, I don't see any harm in the car park. And I'll bring you back to that thing that every condition actually has to be based on actual risk. And I don't think there is actual risk at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. I really don't see it. Then there's single sales and the limit of single units of beer or RTDs or ciders. There's a need for that in some places, and a real need, but not everywhere. And again, it's an application that has to be, it's a condition that must be based on something in the area. Single purchases of a 500ml can or less, it's people that want to limit how much they buy. And as Ian said earlier about they don't have enough money to spend, they're only having a couple of cans because that's all my budget allows. And that's great. That's really good. People who enjoy crafties, they like buying singles as well because they're all singles and you get to choose. I'm going to have some of that one and some of the behemoth and some of that one, and you get to taste, and it's a variety. What you guys want to achieve with this condition is to not sell the single high-strength cans to people who are begging in the street for money, or to people who are washing car windscreens in order to get money so that they then can go to the bottle-o, well, not that bottle-o, I'm just meaning an off-licence, and getting a single can. That's the people you want to stop. It's the people that are drinking in Clive Square. And they don't, it's hard for them to get $10 or $15 to get a six-pack. It's those single sales that you really want to target. And I think there needs to be some real consideration about when that condition applies and how it's worded. It's really important. And on the whole, I don't think Napier is overrun with alcohol-related harm that comes from excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol. I think that the bulk of us, in fact, I know the bulk of us actually drink alcohol responsibly, and I don't feel that I need to be punished, overly punished by people who can't drink responsibly. That's my personal thing. We're actually, as a society, drinking less than we used to drink. 10 years ago, we drank far more than we're drinking now. I've got nieces and nephew who are in their early 20s. One of my nieces doesn't drink at all. She's 25, chooses not to. No thanks, I've got other things to do. I'm getting up at 5 with the ponies. And my nephew, he'll go through stages of not drinking at all too, and I'm going to be the sober driver for the next 2 months. It's not as dire as it once was. It's not as bad as it once was. And I think it's really important that we recognise that. I think I've said about the 2 a.m. I want Jasper to be able to go to the Thirsty Whale. I really think it's important that we have somewhere as a tourist destination. We've got somewhere for these kids to go at that time of night. It's not going to stop them. I mean, 2 a.m. is not going to stop them drinking. Most of them don't even go out till 11 o'clock, and that's the thing. They just choose not to. I think the police then know that these are the handful of places that we've got and are open at that time, and the police know, and they resource themselves appropriately. Napier's a great city. We rely on our tourists to do winery tours, deco tours, and enjoy our hospitality, and that's what we do really, really well. And that's my submission.
Excellent, thank you.
So, any questions?
Yeah, we open up for any questions. Councillor Crystal.
Thank you, through the Mayor. We had a submitter, and I just wondered, in your experience, if you'd seen it, who was extremely worried. They were a venue that hosts weddings and things, that if it got to a certain time, they would have to basically start serving in plastic glasses at the wedding.
I would be
You've seen
horrified.
that?
No,
You've seen
I've never seen that.
But it's in our conditions. About, but it doesn't actually have a time. So,
I don't see that. If I've never seen that imposed on any licence. I've seen special licences where you have to serve in plastic or decant from beer from bottles. And look, at cricket, they don't, you don't want bottles, you don't want people throwing bottles and things like that. Yeah, I would be horrified if at my wedding or a particular event that at a certain time it had to go to plastic, because where's the harm? What risk are we trying to stop at that particular event? We've got people in hospitality are professionals. They know their business. They know their business better than I know their business, better than anyone does. And ultimately, people want to be doing the right thing, and they know when to cut off service.
Councillor Brown. Kia ora, through the Mayor. And thank you for your submission. I've got 2 questions.
Cool.
Firstly, you talked about how your experience with DLCs is that they take our list of discretionary conditions as a set of recommendations.
Yep.
And looking through the wording, there is no sort of distinction in that. Would you be more comfortable if there was some wording that said something, or some guidance in the LAP that confirmed that these are tools in the DLC toolkit and it's not intended as a list of recommendations?
As a list of pseudo-mandatory conditions, you mean? I think you need to say that, and in these situations it would apply here. So with your advertising, the one that you've got about advertising, someone was at the public health, the medical officer of health talked about no sandwich boards. So in Auckland they created a note that went out about conditions that would be imposed on all bottle shops post this date, unless there was good reason not to impose the condition. And it talked about it's 25 or 30% of the shop frontage, lifestyle images. What they wanted to stop is garish, horrible shop fronts that are full of AO signs saying Steinlager $12. They didn't want that. They wanted to remove the prices from the front, and they wanted to remove the, they wanted to make things look a bit better in terms of visual amenity. So they've imposed that, and look, it's done some good work. But what your one hasn't said is anything is wine glass. Is that part of advertising? Or is that just a lifestyle branding? The grapes, the wine barrel, there's all sorts of things that could be on the shop frontage that aren't alcohol in your face, but are they permitted and are they not? And then it gets subjective, and then you've got an unenforceable condition, because what your opinion is completely different to mine.
And secondly, and a bit of a heads up to staff that I'll ask them to comment later, in your experience, how are liquor licences enforced? So you described it as being quite black and white, around half an hour waiting on another staff member.
Yep.
But I'm aware in enforcing of some of our other licences that we often take an education, supportive approach first.
But if it's a condition of licence, you lawfully cannot sell alcohol if it's that half an hour when you're missing a security officer, and that's an issue. How a licensed, Ray will go out and go into licensed premises and make sure they're doing what they need to do, that there's no intox, there's no minors, that the signage is up, might check your manager register. They should be going out and enforcing and having a look. And it's part of the licensing inspector and the police's role to do that. Public health don't have that ability to go out and have a look, apart from when they're reporting on an application, and then the medical officer of health will send out a delegate, and they also will check to see if the gin trap's got all their signs up, and if their manager register is in place, and if food's available the whole time.
And so just supplementary, or drawing out for me that when there is a breach,
yep,
is it an immediate shutdown, or have you seen a sort of a reasonableness test?
There needs to be a reasonable approach, and I'll say that till I'm blue in the face. And the first step of a reasonable approach is education, and what you've done wrong, and then you'll know if someone is made a genuine mistake, and genuine mistakes do happen. You know, we're human after all. There are some out there, though, that will have, if I've only got 3 security guards on and I'm meant to have 4, and that's Murphy's Law, tells you that's when the police come, and they're within their rights because it's a blatant breach of licence condition to apply for a Section 280 to have my licence suspended or cancelled. And there are some inspectors out there within New Zealand that would do that without hesitation. A warning letter would be nicer.
Any further questions? Councillor Bogan.
Yes,
last question and then
sorry. There's been a lot of talk about the DLC and all this. It's not a question for you, but a question for our officers. Would it be possible when you present to us, could you just explain who they are, how often they meet, what do they do, and how much leeway they have, please? Because this is very relevant to the discretionary conditions that we're looking at. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Georgie, for your time. You've been very patient waiting.
Oh, that's right. I came early.
Yeah, but and for your 2 submissions, we really appreciate the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Our next submitter is online, and I understand we have Paul Redditch in place of Nina Daly for Woolworths New Zealand. So, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the proposed LAP this morning. My name is Paul Redditch. I'm the National Alcohol Responsibility Manager for Woolworths New Zealand. There are 2 matters that we want to submit on today, and it's somewhat convenient that I've just heard Mrs. Robertson's submission. I think the place to start is on discretionary conditions. Discretionary conditions for us as a business are problematic because of the way they are imposed. We accept that discretionary conditions are necessary for a given place or given circumstance, and where the evidence supports a discretionary condition being imposed on a licence. But unfortunately, the general approach, and I can't speak specifically about Napier, I can only talk about my experience nationally, is that discretionary conditions are seen as a list of conditions that must be imposed, and the sheer fact that they are in an LAP, they are adopted as almost mandatory. There is a legal test for discretionary conditions, and we've covered that in our submission, but very briefly, a discretionary condition is specifically designed to deal with a particular harm that has been identified in a given location, and that the risk of alcohol-related harm would be significantly reduced if that condition was to be applied. And we're asking for a claratory comment in the LAP to confirm that these are not mandatory conditions. They are a list of conditions that can be applied based on the evidence that's before the committee or a licensing inspector or whoever, simply so we can review the evidence and make a decision whether we want to agree to the condition or not. The second part that we wanted to just comment on is obviously the hours. I'm not going to comment on the 9 p.m. closing any further than I already have, other than to say there is an expectation from communities that supermarkets are open for business, and reducing the trading hour at the closing time adds a level of complexity that I'm not sure is appreciated fully. Auckland Council, for example, has simply just changed their hours from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that has added about $1 million of cost to our business simply because there is a requirement that we fence the areas off. We have to make business decisions about whether we leave the store open. We have to hire additional security. It does create additional problems. So I would caution a reduction in the closing hour with the cost that it imposes to the business. In terms of the opening hour, my submission is very simple. There is no evidence that I've seen either in Napier or nationally that supports moving the opening hour from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And while the High Court of Appeal deemed that you could take a precautionary approach, there still has to be some evidence of harm or some evidence that it will reduce harm, and none of the documentation that I've looked at in relation to the LAP suggests that set between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. is a harmful time for alcohol consumption. Those are the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you for your time today. I apologise for being slightly late. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Paul, and we're running late anyway, so no need to apologise. I'll just open up for any questions, councillors. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, in 2016, as Progressive Enterprises, you were one of the 3 industry bodies that challenged Napier City Council's proposed hours of trade, threatened to take us to court if we were going to adopt what the community wanted. And as a result, we had a very watered-down LAP. Are you suggesting that if we reduce the hours from 7 till 9 a.m., that you will be challenging us in court?
I don't mean to laugh, I'm sorry. I wasn't with the business in 2016, so I can't comment what happened in 2016 at all. We've tried to adopt a slightly different approach to that now. I'm not suggesting that we will challenge or otherwise. What I'm merely saying is that there needs to be an evidential basis to make that move. I haven't seen anything that suggests that evidence exists. I haven't for a moment considered what that next step would be in the slightest, but certainly I started with the business in 2016, and we did a lot of things that back then that we probably wouldn't do today. Is the only way I can answer that question, ma'am.
Okay, I think the law has changed as well.
Yeah, there's obviously still the opportunity for judicial reviews and other avenues, but the ability to directly appeal something has gone. That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Brown.
Kia ora. Thank you for your submission through the Mayor. The lawyer for foodstuffs spoke about a test that was considering the reasonableness or unreasonableness of these laws, and wondering whether you see it as unreasonable to have some of your patrons have a time when they can shop where they are not exposed to to alcohol sales. I'm thinking particularly for those who have alcohol addiction issues.
So that's a challenging question.
Yes.
So in terms of the LAP, the reasonableness test is the evidence of alcohol-related harm, and will a change to the LAP reduce alcohol-related harm? That's the first question, and that needs to be an evidence-based question. And in my view, it would be unreasonable to particularly shift the morning hours. The evening hours become slightly more complicated and problematic, and obviously where there is evidence of harm, a shortening of those hours can happen. There are mechanisms for us to serve those people who don't want to be exposed to alcohol through a number of mechanisms that we have available to shoppers. where they don't see any alcohol advertising and they certainly don't see any product, that becomes far more complicated from an in-store shopping experience, regardless of what the LAP says, because short of hoarding up an area with black fencing or completely opaque fencing, there is always going to be an element of seeing alcohol, regardless of what the LAP says. And that's going to be challenging in the supermarket environment, and I do wonder whether it would pass the reasonableness test if that was a goal, and then equally, what other options do we have available for people who don't want that level of exposure in the supermarkets? And we do have another number of mechanisms available for people who don't want to do that. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but it certainly was a challenging one for me to answer.
Yeah, it is the crux of the issue we've got here, I suppose. Just wondering, would you be able to give us some examples of other things that you can do to help support those dealing with alcohol addiction issues?
Sure. So, for example, for an online shopping account, if you don't opt in to see alcohol, you can't see it. If you don't opt in to get notifications about alcohol, you don't get any notifications of alcohol. So it requires a definitive choice to see alcohol online. Equally, if you don't want to go into the shop or be exposed to alcohol in the shop, then we've got our click and collect service, we've got our direct to boot service, we've got our home delivery service. So there's a number of options, and those are all free. So I think we charge a small fee for delivery, but certainly direct to boot and click and collect and e-lockers and various other things are all free of charge, so that people don't need to go into a physical supermarket if there is an addiction issue there. It requires kind of a collaborative approach in terms of them making healthy choices and then us providing the service around those healthy choices. But certainly we have mechanisms to suppress that. And while it's not easy to do online, we've managed to find a way to do it, and it's done.
Thank you. It's helpful.
Thank you very much, Paul, for taking the time to come and present to us today. Much appreciated.
Thank you for your time.
Excellent. We now come to our final submitter, Nathan Cowie of Communities Against Alcohol, who we also have with us online. So a very warm welcome, Nathan.
Harm. Against alcohol harm.
Yes, kia ora koutou. My name is Nathan Cowie, and I'm an advisor with Community Against Alcohol Harm. So Communities Against Alcohol Harm provides advice and support to local community organisations, members of the public, Māori and other stakeholders who are seeking to reduce alcohol-related harm in their communities, especially harm or potential harm that arise from alcohol applications. Don't believe we've worked directly with licensing applications in Napier, but communities in Napier are certainly welcome to get in touch with us for support. So we broadly support the proposed review of the Napier local alcohol policy. We recognise that there were strong protections in place from the joint 2019 policy, and we commend Napier City Council for improvements, adjustments and further measures that will prevent Napier communities from alcohol harm. So firstly, on the trading hours, we strongly support the 9 p.m. closing hour for off licences. Since Auckland put in the 9 p.m. closing hour for off licences, and that was tested all the way to the Supreme Court and back. I see that there's really no issue with implementing that in any community, and certainly Napier will benefit by having that closing hour. Probably got less of an opinion on the opening hour for off licences. I mean, if you shop at supermarkets between 7 and 9 a.m., you are going to see people that have got a slab of beer in their trolley, and maybe they're not the kind of people who are kind of stocking up for later in the week or whatever. But it's really up to the council whether you want to kind of test the resolve of the supermarket industry. I would say that they're quite protective of that 7 a.m. opening hour. In terms of on license closing hours, I think 2 a.m. is the spot for a closing time that allows a decent nightlife, but takes the edge off of some of the harms that occur later at night. It is the closing hour that, say, a state like California has in the US, and nobody's saying that that kind of impinges their nightlife over there. In terms of the one-way door, I would listen to the experience of your local police, ambulance officers, and emergency departments about what kind of harms occur during that time, and whether the staggered nature of a one-way door would ameliorate those harms. I am from Napier. I kind of grew up in the Cabana Hotel, maybe 1981. The manageress was my babysitter while my mother worked in that pub, and my father performed there. It's been about 20 years since I've been out late at night in Napier, but I certainly do recall, at 3 o'clock when all the licensed premises closed, there was a lot of people milling around on the street. And those situations can be dangerous when people have been consuming alcohol. Impulses are increased and inhibitions are lowered, and that's the kind of thing that people who wouldn't ordinarily get into scuffles, or arguments, find themselves more at risk of getting into trouble. And I wanted to talk about your discretionary conditions. So I support a lot of the discretionary conditions, and I would, catching up on the discussions that have occurred earlier, they are discretionary conditions. Perhaps you do want to signal within the LAP document the kind of circumstances where you would like to see these conditions considered, but they are discretionary by nature, not mandatory. So it's up to the District Licensing Committee to have regard to them, and also relying on the input of the 3 regulatory agencies: the licensing inspector, medical officer of health, and the along with from applicants and any community objectors that might come in. I would note that it's very hard for communities to have input into special licence applications. These are not publicly notified, so communities really are relying on the licensing committee and the 3 agencies working with the applicants to get the right balance of protections in place. In terms of the proposed discretionary condition on single sales, Communities Against Alcohol Harm has a lot of experience with single sales conditions, and the wording is really important. So I think wording like mainstream is altogether too vague if you're trying to separate craft beer versus ordinary mainstream beer. And I would note specifically that when you're talking about volumes, you have to be very careful. So less than 500 ml is not going to work. That essentially will endorse single sales of 500 ml cans. If you want to set the limit at, if you want to capture 500 ml cans, you need to have wording such as 500 ml or less. In terms of where we've got to and the conditions that we negotiate, find that the emergence of high strength beers that are in 500 ml cans that start from about 7% alcohol by volume, containing 2.8 standard drinks and upwards for just a few dollars, These are an emerging issue. So about as best we can do to come up with a reasonable condition is something like no single sales of RTDs or mainstream beers, 500ml or less, and no single sales of beers containing 2 or more standard drinks per container are to be sold. In terms of kind of separating craft beer from what you might consider mainstream beer, we've found that having a price guide there is actually probably more effective than having a volume guide. So we like to have conditions which say no single sales, less than $6 per unit or per container. As we believe, some of the premium craft beers are out there on sale for about $7, $8, $9, $10. Some of them a bit more. And also, if we limit those sales to 2 or more standard drinks per container, that takes some of those strong beers off the market. And someone referred to the people drinking in Clive Square. I haven't seen people drinking in Clive Square recently because I don't spend a lot of time in Napier these days. But certainly communities around the country are kind of grappling with the issue of public place drinking and the harms that go along with that. In terms of external advertising, so I really commend Napier City Council for including this as a discretionary condition in the local alcohol policy. But I think, like the proposed single sales discretionary condition, it does need to be kind of specific about what it is covering and what it is not covering. So it might cover alcohol brands and, it might cover external display of pricing. And certainly this was, rampant 10 years ago. It was very, off-license advertising was very oriented around, price and brand advertising on the external of stores. But, businesses adapt. And these days, I think, what we're seeing is we're seeing really bright colours. We're seeing franchise brands and being wrapped over the whole sites. And I think I've got a picture in my written submission of an outlet on Carlisle Street, I believe, where it's just an orange beacon. And the reason why this is important is because there is a causal link between alcohol marketing and youth drinking. I think your medical officer of health or public health position talked about this earlier, and he mentioned the earlier initiation of drinking and the youth drinking. So I think any way that you can use this discretionary condition and be specific about what you want to reduce, but I strongly support the inclusion of that discretionary condition. A couple of other matters. We do support the recommendations around buy now, pay later and remote sales. I think in terms of remote sales, delaying dispatch or delivery to the next day does heavy lifting in terms of de-risking those sales. And in terms of buy now, pay later, that would be a very useful discretionary condition for reducing harm among the more vulnerable sectors of the community. And finally, I just wanted to also mention health warnings. Can, if you choose, develop a discretionary condition to require pregnancy warning signs or cancer signs displayed at off-licences. And while it's not in your proposal, it may be difficult to put it in your proposal after the fact. I would hope that such interventions be considered and that, they are included as discretionary conditions so as to give a signal to the district licensing committees and to the regulatory agencies that such health warnings are not so onerous and a good way to reduce alcohol harm. Thank you very much for having me speak today.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I'll open up for any questions. I think being the last submitter, you probably get off the off the hook a bit with questions. Everyone's already asked them earlier. If there's no questions, apologies for getting the name of your organisation incorrect at the start. Communities Against Alcohol Harm. And thank you very much both for your written submission and taking the time to Zoom into us today. Appreciate it.
Ngā mihi kia koutou.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of our oral submitters. So we will take a half-an-hour break and be back at 1 to have staff present their recommendations and then open up for questions and deliberations. Thank you very much. floor is yours.
Kia ora koutou, through the chair. Thanks for having me to present my submissions analysis for the draft local alcohol policy. So we consulted on the draft between the 14th of April and the 14th of March. We promoted the consultation through a number of ways: our website, the Say It Napier page, one licensee meeting, one stakeholder meeting that was shared with Hastings, various invitations to stakeholders around those meetings. We also attended Ngā Manukunuka o Te Iwi Māori Committee to promote the consultation, and reached out to 6 mana whenua groups and organisations as advised by Te Waka Rangapu. The package for the consultation included a statement of proposal, issues and options report, draft research, and the draft LAP, and invited feedback on that in a number of ways through the online website, hard copy, via email, were the main ways that we received feedback. In total, we received 147 submissions. However, as Mayor Wise had pointed out in the beginning, a number of those were incomplete and can be disregarded. So in total, we had 102 completed submissions. So it was a little trick for new players in terms of our online submission tool, that it recorded information when people accessed that tool or entered data to provide for an example. So those submissions have been communicated to you to be withdrawn. 102 remain, and that's what we've heard today and has been provided to you for consideration. My paper presents themes from those submissions. So reading through themes, there's the 4 areas where the LAP can affect policies. The first one being locations that sell and supply alcohol, and some strong submissions were made around proximity restrictions near schools, and also location-based restrictions in suburbs. Onto maximum trading hours, you've heard a mixed evidence around those maximum trading hours and the balancing act that council's trying to achieve through protection of hospitality businesses and employment, vibrancy and nightlife economy, while balancing that against alcohol harm reduction. Onto the one-way door, a common theme emerging around that was around transport availability, and then quite a lot of feedback in terms of the discretionary conditions, both proposed new discretionary conditions and ones that are either not liked or could be altered through the submission process. Overall, we asked a final question: should council adopt their local alcohol policy? And it was nearly 50-50. In my report is 56-44. Withdrawing some of those incomplete submissions makes it roughly 50-50. So essentially, the council's got a decision to make around balancing harm and negative impacts on local communities with a consistent set of provisions across Hawke's Bay was the other one. So we've been working closely with Hastings, and as submitters such as Tourism Hawke's Bay requested consistency across the region.
Sorry, Stephen, can I just interrupt and ask for some clarity there? Because Councillor Crown just pointed out to me, I was under the impression that Hastings was consulting on 1 a.m, but I understand they've actually got 2 categories. One is with a 1 a.m. closure and one is with a 2 a.m. closure?
Yeah. So in my report, I've explained that. So we're aligned in terms of the bars, nightclubs and taverns. And so that was the direction given from the 20th of February meeting. There are 2 other categories where Hastings has proposed a 1 hour reduction in their draft LAP, which we didn't pick up at that 20th of February meeting. So that's for cafes and restaurants and entertainment venues. So that there is explained on page 11 of my report. That's an issue where the LAPs don't fully align around that time frame. So I think that's the 1 a.m. that you've been talking about there. That's for cafes, restaurants, wineries, winery restaurants, hotels, accommodation, and then also entertainment venues, function centres. So Hastings has got a 1 hour reduction on those. as it had turned out through the workshop, we were looking at the status quo for those, which would have been a 2 a.m. close, until we got to the 20th of February meeting, where we put our reduction on the bars, restaurants as directed in that meeting.
Councillor Price.
Just when you went on the submissions, you said there's 147, then you went down to 102. In that 102, is the Thirsty Whale group under one submission in that answer? Or
There'd be multiple from employees and
so are they one submission, or are they 17 submissions?
There's about 10.
So they're in that 10 in the 102?
Yes.
Thank you.
May I ask a question too about that? Stephen, there were some submissions that they ticked all sorts of boxes and wrote all sorts of things, and when it came to, do you agree with the draft LAP, they didn't put anything. So where did you count those?
Yeah, so the questions, there were no mandatory questions in the submission, so you could get all the way through and answer nothing, or you could choose which parts of the submission form you completed. If they didn't answer that question, then it wouldn't have been counted in that percentage that I talked about there.
Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Through the chair. Also adding to that, for example, in I guess question E and F, people could write yes, they support it, and the next one, no, they don't. And yet further down, I think it's an I, do you support this? They could have put yes, yet part of their submission says no. Have we picked that apart in any shape or form?
To some degree. Yes, it was identified fairly early on that they could have had those types of different scenarios where, for example, you might have supported the supermarket reduction but not the nightclub reduction, and vice versa. It would be on a case-by-case, submission-by-submission basis that could be looked at.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering if you could tell us about the review process for the consultation document or form. Do we have legal review? Who did it go past, etc.? I'm just picking up on Councillor McGrath's points there.
Oh, okay.
And some of the, I think, the aggregate sort of bringing together of information and some of the statistics that we've been provided with.
Yep. Essentially, the process would be, as the author of those things, I would gain feedback from colleagues in the policy area and then seek authorisation through Luke and Rachel and the CE.
Sorry, I set off a series of questions then. We'll let you carry on presenting the report.
Sorry, that was in the context of my report. In terms of the questions, it's a similar sort of thing. We discuss them internally and publish them with support from our colleagues in comms. So I have a set of recommendations in the report for Council to consider, along with two potential risks, one being the potential for unintended consequences where our LAP is materially different from Hastings, and also the time frame. The time frame being that the current LAP lapses in August 2025. The options available to Council are to recommend the draft LAP with any amendments for adoption at Council on the 26th of June, or to make amendments to the draft for adoption at the 26th of June meeting.
So just a question about that, Madam Mayor. So if we approve or disapprove this today, it's not valid until it's like a double debating, is it, at the June meeting?
No, we could actually make it subject to changes, like we don't have to just adopt what the draft is. We can make changes to the draft based on deliberations and debate today,
yes,
and then adopt it subject to those changes being enacted, all today.
Right, but there could be changes made at that other meeting? This isn't going to be the final adoption of the LAP today, is it? The final adoption? So if so, why do we have to also do it in June?
Is it coming back?
Through the chair, I might just add to that. So as far as the process goes today, we've got a draft that we're considering, some recommendations. You may direct us to go away and make some changes.
Oh, I get it.
At which time we'll go away, make those changes, and then we'll report back to you on the 26th of June.
With the change.
With those changes as you've recommended.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that.
So I think I'm done with my report. The question around the DLC members. So those DLC members are available on our website. The members are Stuart Hilton, Dave Fellows, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Price and Ross Pinkham. They meet as required, and their terms of reference is also available on the council website.
So do they meet often or not very often?
We have not met for some considerable time. There's been no need. So we only meet when there's an appeal or there's a licence to be granted or whatever. So we probably haven't met for at least a year.
At least.
At least, yeah.
So if I could ask another question, please. So if a licence is granted for an event or something like that, do you see it or is it just automatically approved by the staff?
So the staff don't approve the licence, it goes to the DLC, and it's the chair can decide to grant on the papers. So what my team do will be to inquire into that licence and provide an inspector's report to the DLC for consideration as to whether they would grant that licence or not.
You don't see it, no.
Not necessarily
No.
see it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Then Councillor Price.
Kia ora, through the Mayor. Sort of primed you on this question before. Looking at enforcement, do we take a really black and white approach or do we have some supportive education first type approaches?
Yeah, so like with any compliance and enforcement approach, we would apply our graduated enforcement model to that, which is commonly referred to as a VADE model, voluntary assisted directed enforced. And so part of that is an educational type approach to getting that. It wouldn't be a black and white application of those, particularly where there's a discretionary element to those things in the policy anyway. It would need to be on the licence as a condition, and then further so it would be as part of a graduated approach to enforcement.
Thank you. I got a bit confused in there. Are we, not in your one, are we the enforcers of it, or does it go to the police to enforce?
It's a dual role, so police would have a role in enforcing the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, so quite commonly our team will link in with police on certain types of inspections. Yeah.
And we can keep that. Okay.
Councillor Price.
I'm just trying to, we got an email the other day on the results of the closing time, 2 or 3, and it had a reasonably accurate answer on it. I was just wondering, you said it 50-50. I don't think it was that unconclusive. Can you give me the exact figures on it, please?
I can, I've got it.
Yeah.
42% supported the proposal to AM. 47%, and that's after counting the Thirsty Whale submissions as only one, at 47%. Then it raised to 47% in support of the 2 AM. So it would have been 58% against prior to reweighting it for the submissions from 58% not in support.
Yeah, so that was 58% staying at 3 AM.
And
Yeah.
And then it goes to 53% not in support after counting all of Thirsty Whale as one. So it's still a majority either way against the proposal to reduce to 2 AM. Councillor McGrath.
Through you, Madam Mayor, was that the only lot that were grouped together?
I believe so, yeah.
Because there was, I think, a whole lot from one trust. Were they counted as one or individually?
I think the others were removed for that particular trust because they were not complete.
No, they were complete.
But there is 2 from Health New Zealand, for example. There are other submitters where there was more than one.
not really a consistent view.
Did I see a hand up over this side? No? Oh, Councillor Crystal. I thought I was with one.
Just through I was going to say the same thing. There were definitely some that were definitely more than one from the same group, because I noticed that as well. So it's kind of, if you're going to be fair to one group. But the other question I've got is that the discretionary conditions, we've added, where do they come from? Is this, have you got them from other councils? Who makes these up?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we looked at, remember after the workshop for national level guidance around discretionary conditions, couldn't find any. However, we were guided by police in terms of what they had recommended as a set of discretionary conditions. It's not to say that it fully represents what exactly was provided to in the information, but you can look at in the submission pack. Cover 2 has got the police pre-information, and so essentially they come from there. We did some work with Hastings to get a common set of discretionary conditions, so what we have there is basically a starting point for discretionary conditions, which Council considered at its 20th February meeting.
Councillor Crown and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Just touching on the Hastings alignment and process, etc. So in the past or currently we have a joint lap. We're looking to have separate laps, but to have them aligned. Can I ask how that's come about? Why we've gone from having a joint one to individual?
Yeah, through the chair, that was a decision that was made last year around a number of reasons, some being administrative and the requirement to get both Hastings and Napier City Council groups together. It proved to be quite challenging, and so on that basis they decided that they would propose to split the two. Obviously still working quite closely together to assure where we can have that alignment, but for the purpose of being able to, or ease of undertaking a review, it's been decided that we would split the two.
Or was that the request of Hastings District Council?
Thank you. That's, I was going to ask, whose idea was it? And I guess supplementary to that, are our processes the same as each other? For example, we're having hearings now. It's been heard by the complete council. Like, are they doing the same thing? How, timing-wise, what's happening there?
Through the chair, timing-wise, things are very similar. Their internal process is a little bit different to ours, however, achieving the same outcome.
Can you please, through the chair, can you please tell me how it differs?
Through the chair, I don't know the specifics, but I do know that where we are meeting today to determine how we are to proceed to prepare and then present to you a final draft. Hastings District Council have been through their hearings process. They're now preparing a position paper. And correct me if I'm wrong, they then go through another process, another meeting prior to the 26th of June in order to finalise their LAP.
Thank you.
Just going back to the, no, you go, and then I'll go.
Through the chair. Just go back to the discretionary conditions. So you've heard that there's a bit of angst in the community around them becoming a sort of pseudo-mandatory list of recommendations. And just, I suppose, foreshadowing that having that as a comment that makes sure that they are discretionary sounds like an appropriate amendment to the document. Just wondering, what training or guidance does the DLC members, or do the DLC members receive to help them apply these conditions fairly and consistently?
So DLC members would be appointed on the basis of having some familiarity with the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act and the conditions that are there. And so the draft there does spell out on page 5, the draft LAP talks about the discretion, so be happy to highlight the discretionary intent around those. Once the draft LAP's adopted, a copy would be provided to the DLC, and they were able to refer to it from there.
while you think, because mine's along the same line, supplementary question around the discretionary conditions. So does one of those conditions have to be included in the LAP to be applied by the DLC? Or do they have their own ability based on, say, for example, the information that's provided to them in an alcohol management plan? Did they then have the discretion to apply conditions that aren't necessarily included in the LAP?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So we are not at risk of a commissioner not being able to apply a condition they believe is important just because we haven't specified it in our LAP.
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool, thank you.
Could I just add, as long as it passes the reasonableness test?
And the supply of,
And
alcohol.
the Act.
Yeah, there's the other mechanisms, isn't there, to, yeah. Councillor Crystal.
Through the Mayor. And so in the reverse situation, it's a discretionary condition, and I'll use the mission as an example. They want to sell wine by the bottle, which they've done for however many years. Is it being in there now, will that be allowed to happen?
So the discretionary conditions are at the discretion of the DLC. And so prior to putting any of those discretionary conditions on a licence, it would need to be something that the licensee has been able to satisfy in terms of a condition. And so I don't believe that the intent here is to apply everything to every event. It would be at the discretion of the DLC.
There's no further questions for staff. Then we will just take a recess so that we can just have some time with our lawyers, ask any questions of them. So that will be done.